So we're getting a divorce. But who do you girls want to live with? Our oldest daughter, Emily, is the first to answer. I want to live with Dad. What? My husband, Kevin, looks shocked. Then our second daughter, Chloe, speaks up. Me too. I want to stay with Dad. The twins, Lily and Sophie, also say they want to live with him. Kevin looks pale, completely taken aback by what he's hearing. If that's what the kids want, then you'll have to take care of them, I say. My name is Rachel, and I'm 45 years old. I work in an office, and I married Kevin when I was 25. We've had many arguments over the years and even thought about divorcing a few times, but somehow 20 years passed. The main reason we stayed together was because of our children. We have 4 daughters. Emily is in her last year of high school, Chloe is in her second year, and the twins, Lily and Sophie, are in 8th grade. I never expected to have so many kids or for them to grow up so quickly, but they get along well, and Kevin and I have been managing, so I thought we had a happy family. Now that they're older, they can do most things on their own, so I don't have to worry too much. This also lets me focus on my job. We live in a house that originally belonged to my grandfather, so we don't have to pay rent or a mortgage. Since it's a big house, we've never felt cramped, even with all of us living together. These days, my favorite thing is watching my kids grow up. Emily is studying hard for college, so I make her snacks when she stays up late. Now that the kids help with chores, Kevin and I have more time for ourselves. We've started enjoying quiet evenings together, talking about work and the kids' futures while having a drink. Kevin used to have a stressful job with little time off, but he switched jobs a few years ago, and now he hardly works overtime. Though he sometimes has to work weekends, he's more relaxed and smiles more often. Once Emily goes to college, why don't we take a trip? He suggested happily one evening. He cares about our family, and I always thought he was a great husband. This year marks our 20th wedding anniversary. Our daughters have been planning a celebration for us, and I was really looking forward to it. But before that could happen, something unexpected occurred. One evening, while we were eating dinner together, Chloe seemed off. She didn't respond when I spoke to her and looked like she had something on her mind. I figured it was just normal teenage mood swings, but after dinner, I decided to check on her. Chloe, can I come in? Mom? Is something wrong? You seemed a little distracted today. Yeah? I'm here if you want to talk. You can tell me anything. She looked down, and I thought she wasn't ready to say anything yet. I started to leave, but then she stopped me. Wait. I turned back to her. She hesitated before finally speaking. I saw Dad walking with a woman I didn't recognize. What? Maybe it was someone from work. I don't think so. They were holding hands. They were. I was speechless. Was Kevin cheating on me? I had no proof yet, but if they were walking like that, they were definitely close. I'm sorry you had to see that, I said. Why are you apologizing? You didn't do anything wrong, Mom. But it must have been hard to sit through dinner with Dad after seeing that. Yeah, it was. Thank you for telling me. That was really brave. I'll look into it. Okay. I felt terrible for Chloe, knowing she had to keep that to herself. If Kevin was really cheating on me, that was something I couldn't forgive. Talking about a family vacation while sneaking around behind my back, was he just pretending to be a good father? I needed proof, so I hired a private investigator. A few weeks later, I got the results. In the end, Kevin was having an affair. I was completely shocked. Deep down, I had still hoped it wasn't true. When I told Chloe the results of the investigation, she was just as stunned. She had always looked up to her father, so I could only imagine how painful this was for her. I can't believe it, Dad. Mom, you're divorcing him, right? Yes, but I need to talk to all of you first and see what you want. I don't want a dad who cheats on you. Okay, I'll gather everyone so we can talk. It was a Saturday and all the girls were at home. Kevin was out, saying he had to work, but I wasn't sure if that was true anymore. I sat my daughters down and told them about the affair. Their reactions were immediate, shock and disgust. Unbelievable, Emily muttered, looking sick. Even the twins, though still in middle school, understood what an affair was. Do you think I should divorce your dad? All 4 of them nodded. They also said they wanted to stay with me after the separation. With that, there was no reason to stay married. That same day, when Kevin got home, I told him we needed to talk. We sat down in the living room. Before I could even start, he spoke first. I'm sorry. I've been having an affair. What? I blinked in disbelief. You're telling me this now? He hesitated, then dropped another bombshell. She's pregnant. Excuse me, pregnant? I was so shocked I couldn't even react properly. I hadn't expected him to confess, and I certainly hadn't expected this. So, you're saying you want to be with her? Yeah, I'm sorry, Rachel. I want a divorce so I can be with her. You can have custody of the kids. What? Did he really think he could just walk away so easily? His voice sounded apologetic, but his words were ridiculous. You've got to be kidding me. Do you really think you can just do whatever you want? I know, but she's pregnant. That's your problem. You two weren't careful, and now you have to deal with it. That has nothing to do with me. How can you say that? Kevin looked at me with no guilt at all. Anyway, I'm going to be with her, so you think about it. With that, he started packing his bags. Now that he had admitted to cheating, he seemed to have no shame about leaving to be with his mistress. As soon as he walked out the door, my daughter stormed into the living room, furious. But he got her pregnant. I can't believe it. What was all that talk about family? I hate him. My daughters were beyond angry. They had heard everything, and they couldn't believe how selfish their father was. I was just as furious, but then my daughters started whispering among themselves. After a moment, they turned to me with an idea. Are you sure? I asked, surprised. They nodded. I hesitated, but in the end, I decided to trust them. 1 week later, Kevin came back. Are you ready to get divorced now? He asked casually. My girlfriend's pregnant, so I want to marry her as soon as possible. I sighed. His selfishness knew no limits. Fine, let's get a divorce. Great, thanks. Here are the papers. He handed me the documents, and as I signed, I spoke calmly. About custody, I'll let the kids decide. Huh? For the first time, Kevin looked nervous. Well, didn't they say they wanted to be with you? They wouldn't want to stay with a father who cheated and got another woman pregnant, right? Oh, so you do understand that, he muttered, relieved. Okay then, let's call them in. What? I called the girls into the living room. We're doing this now, Kevin asked, looking confused. They already know everything, Kevin, I said. They know you cheated. They know she's pregnant. Kevin looked around the room awkwardly, clearly uncomfortable. I could tell he was nervous about how the kids would react. They sat down, and I asked the question. So we're getting a divorce. Who do you girls want to live with? Our eldest daughter, Emily, spoke first. I want to live with Dad. What? Kevin's face went pale. Our second daughter, Chloe, added, me too. I want to stay with Dad. Then the twins nodded and said the same thing. Kevin looked like he was about to faint. Wait. Why do you all want to live with me? He stammered. Why does it matter? Emily said. We just do. The girls refused to explain, standing firm in their decision. If that's what they want, then you have to take care of them, I said. No way, Kevin muttered, realizing what had just happened. And just like that, Kevin ended up responsible for all 4 of our daughters. Since I owned the house, he had to move out. When Kevin told his new wife, Jennifer, about the kids, she was really upset. But somehow, he convinced her, and they moved into a 4-bedroom apartment with the girls. Kevin and I got divorced, and he and Jennifer had to pay me some compensation. Since Kevin had a stable job, I didn't have to pay child support. The kids stayed with me on weekends, but most of the time, they lived in Kevin's new apartment. 2 months passed, and it seemed like my daughter's plan was working. One day, Kevin and Jennifer came barging into my house, looking exhausted and frustrated. Were the girls always this difficult? They're so selfish. We can't take it anymore, Kevin shouted. Jennifer looked just as upset. They complain about everything. They won't listen to us at all. Inside, I was laughing, but I kept a straight face. What do you mean? They're great kids. When they lived with me, they helped out and never complained. Kevin threw up his hands. Great kids. They refuse to eat my cooking. Their rooms are always messy, and their school fees. The after-school classes, cram school, tuition. It's all too much. I shrugged. That's not my problem. You're the parents now, so it's your responsibility. We had to rent a 4-bedroom place just to fit everyone. It's way over budget. I raised an eyebrow. That's your own fault. Besides, Emily and Chloe share a room, and so do the twins. You two have one, and the baby has another. They originally wanted their own rooms, but they agreed to share. You should be thankful. That's not the point, Jennifer snapped. Look, Kevin, I said, crossing my arms. You're the one who cheated, and with a 20-year-old, no less, only 2 years older than Emily. That's disgusting. You betrayed me, so don't come crying to me now. You have no right to complain. Now please leave. I turned to walk away, but suddenly Kevin panicked. Wait. Please wait. He looked desperate. We can't do this anymore. I want you to take them back. It was clear that Kevin and Jennifer couldn't handle the kids anymore. Well, okay, if that's what you want, I said. I felt bad for my daughters, having to live with someone like Kevin in the first place, but I wasn't going to let him off the hook so easily. You'll still have to pay child support until they're all grown up, I added. What? No way. That's going to cost a fortune with 4 girls. Kevin protested. Well, then they can stay with you. Fine. Kevin had no choice but to agree. But then, out of nowhere, Jennifer exploded with anger. Wait a minute. No. I thought we only had to pay compensation. But now we're broke, and we still have to pay child support. I want a divorce. I refuse to live in debt. What? Hold on. What about the baby? Kevin stammered. There is no baby. I lied. I only said I was pregnant so you'd leave your wife and marry me. I thought I'd get to live a rich life, but instead I'm stuck in this mess. This is ridiculous. Goodbye. I never want to see you again. With that, Jennifer stormed out, leaving Kevin standing there, completely shocked. I told him to leave too, but he glared at me, like he wanted to argue. Yeah, that's what I thought, I said. Or should I call the police? Kevin panicked and ran out of the house. Later, I filed the paperwork to officially regain custody of my daughters and made sure Kevin was legally required to pay child support. On top of that, he had to keep paying for his expensive apartment, so money was tight for him. But I didn't care. I was going to make sure he paid every cent. His life was now a struggle, barely getting by each month. Serves him right. When the girls heard about it, they were thrilled. We're going to make you happy, Mom, they said. Hearing that was enough to make me happy already. Being a single mom wouldn't be easy, but with my wonderful daughters by my side, I knew we'd make it. I would work hard to give them a good life and protect them no matter what. Honestly, it's disgusting that Kevin cheated with someone so close in age to his own daughter. But I love how my girls stuck together and stood up for themselves. It felt good to see Kevin and his girlfriend get exactly what they deserved. I hope Rachel and her daughters continue to support each other and live a happy life. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. See you next time.
Oh. Ted, you were home. I borrowed the car. In front of her brother, Ashley acted sweetly. Sorry, Ashley. Megan isn't very thoughtful. No worries. As a thank you for letting me borrow the car. Megan, I filled it up with gas. What a capable sister you are. See, Megan, Ashley is considerate. Ted smiles and gently strokes her head. Then I'm heading home. See you later, Ted. See you too, Megan. She smiles warmly at Ted, then gives me a fleeting but eerie grin. What's with that? It gives me the chills. After she leaves, I check the car just in case. No scratches, and just as she said, the gas tank is full. But something bothers me. I can't shake off her creepy smile. Ashley is much more mature. Even if you're mean to her. She returns the car with a full tank. You should learn from her. Ted approaches from behind, grinning. I'm going to check inside the car. What? You still doubt Ashley? I'm seriously going to get angry. Ted is furious that I suspect his beloved sister's goodwill. I mean, I would actually prefer to commute by car too, but I endure it because you use it. Hearing Ted's words, I have an idea. Then, I won't use the car tomorrow, so you can commute with it, Ted. Really? Awesome. I have an important meeting first thing in the morning. Lucky the gas is full. I'm looking forward to tomorrow. I watched Ted's back as he happily enters the house. My name is Megan. I live with my husband Ted and our high school daughter, Candace. I'll be late today because of a drinking party. Got it. Don't drink too much since you have work tomorrow. Okay. Sorry, Candace. I can't pick you up from cram school today. Do your best with your studies. All right. Don't forget my souvenir. What, a souvenir? It's a typical conversation that could be heard in any household, and it feels comforting. We have lived peacefully like this until now. Ted was a coworker who started at the same company after graduating from college. We began talking when we happened to sit next to each other at a drinking party. Is this your niece? I once pointed out the screensaver on Ted's smartphone, which had a cute photo of him going down a slide with a little girl. No, that's my sister. It's just the two of us siblings. You have quite an age difference. 12 years apart. So she's in 5th grade now. Her name's Ashley. Cute, isn't she? Ted is smitten with Ashley, and he showed me many of her photos. Ever since she was little, she followed me around all the time. She's really adorable. I skipped club activities many times just to see Ashley. Nostalgically looking at his sister's childhood photos, I, being an only child, couldn't quite understand Ted's feelings. But Ashley must be happy to be so loved by her brother. I kind of wished I had a brother like that too. I felt a bit envious. Eventually, we started dating and got married when I was 25. Unable to envision working while raising children, I quit my job when I became pregnant. Can I really be a good mother? I've never taken care of a baby before. Don't worry. I used to change Ashley's diapers and even bathed her. It'll be fine. Ted supported me during my emotionally unstable pregnancy. He helped a lot with parenting, and he still cherishes our daughter. Thanks to his family-oriented nature, planning family trips for birthdays, and willingly picking up our daughter from cram school, we were a happy family. I believed this life would continue forever. But the rift between Ted and me began 2 years ago, when Ashley moved near our house shortly after our marriage. I don't know why she chose this timing to move close to us. At first, I thought they were just as close as ever. However, I soon felt uneasy. Ted, want to go shopping together? Wesley's at work today, and I'm alone. Ashley would just walk right into our place and talk to Ted in this super cute way. Since her husband, Wesley, usually worked on weekends, she often dropped by our house during those times. Come anytime. It's nice you're living nearby. Ted seemed pleased to be relied upon by his beloved sister. Initially, it was heartwarming, but I gradually grew tired of Ashley's unreserved visits. Megan's cooking is delicious. Can I have another piece of fried chicken? Of course. Eat as much as you want. Oh, that's the fried chicken I made because it's my daughter's favorite. Candace, you eat a lot too. Yeah. My daughter seemed half exasperated by her aunt's lack of restraint. Ashley, aren't you relying on us too much? It feels like you're having dinner here every week. One day, I subtly mentioned my frustration to Ted. It's fine. She's lonely by herself. But Ted seemed utterly oblivious to my feelings. But Wesley said he'd be home by 7 p.m. Wouldn't it be better for you to wait at your own home? And have dinner together as a couple? Ashley is Ted's beloved sister by blood, but to me, she's a stranger. Even on precious days off, her visits prevented me from resting. I wanted Ted to tell her to come over less often. But he only got grumpy when I mentioned it. Megan, do you dislike Ashley? Not at all. But on our days off, I just want us to spend time as a family too. Ashley is 12 years younger than us. Be kind to her. She may be 12 years younger, but she's not a child anymore, she's 30. I was tired of Ted's never-ending attention to his sister. And his touchy reactions whenever she was brought up. He was oblivious to my feelings. And her inconsiderate behavior escalated. Initially, Ashley came over only on weekends when Ted was home, but eventually, she started coming over even on weekdays. Megan, could you take me shopping? Without a car, she tried to use not just Ted but me as well for rides. Sorry, Ashley. I'm working right now. I had quit my job to be a stay-at-home mom when my daughter started middle school. But I turned my hobby of making accessories into a business. Working from home, crafting and selling. And with my daughter's help promoting on social media, I was earning a decent income. That's right. I assumed you were free since you're at home. Her tone was nonchalant, but her words were thoughtless and irked me every time. Then, could you lend me the car? Sure. I was okay with lending the car, it didn't take up my time, and I thought it was a small favor. But one day, I regretted this decision. Mom, did you hit the car somewhere? When I went to pick up my daughter from tutoring, she suddenly asked as she got in the car. No, I didn't. The back left side is dented. What? Shocked, I checked the car when we got home, and sure enough, the rear left side was dented and scratched, just as my daughter had said. Ashley's face popped into my mind, she had borrowed the car the day before. There's no way she wouldn't have noticed such a bold damage. However, when she returned the keys, she acted as usual, giggling and saying, "Let me borrow it again." Even if it wasn't intentional, one would normally apologize, right? What was she thinking? Anger welled up in me, and I called Ted, who had just taken a bath, to the parking lot. I just took a bath though. Ted grumbled, slightly annoyed. Ashley has been asking to borrow the car frequently, and she dented it. Plus, she didn't mention the damage. Ted caressed the scratch and was momentarily speechless. It's okay. Ashley is an inexperienced driver. What? That doesn't matter. She damaged someone else's car. I don't necessarily want compensation, but normally you would report it and apologize. Ted looked at me quizzically, heating up. Are you sure it was Ashley who damaged it? What do you mean by that? Well, you can't be sure, right? It's possible you did it unknowingly. What? Why am I being suspected? It's impossible not to notice such a significant impact while driving. Ted, unable to think straight when it comes to his cute sister, left me so frustrated that I lost the energy to argue further. This issue was never addressed, and Ashley avoided coming to our place for a while. Perhaps feeling a bit guilty about staying silent about the dent. I hoped she would keep her distance from us. However, that hope was short-lived as she showed up again one day. Just let me use the bathroom. Before she finished speaking, she barged into our house. Use the bathroom before you leave home. I waited with an exasperated look. And she came back looking relieved. Megan, you're busy, right? I'll drive myself, so lend me the car. What an audacious request. First, she should have thanked me for using the bathroom. Instead, as if nothing happened, she asked to borrow the car again. She hasn't learned her lesson at all. I glared at her. No. I need it today. I didn't want to lend her the car ever again. While part of me felt that way, I genuinely needed the car for my daughter's activities today. She responded visibly annoyed. That's mean. What did Ted see in someone like you? I'm going to tell him. She slammed the front door with such force that it made a tremendous noise. Was it necessary to get so angry like that? I had merely stated the fact that I couldn't lend the car because I had plans. Unable to apologize for denting the car, not saying thank you for using the bathroom, and taking her anger out on objects when things didn't go her way. Witnessing her behavior made me regret becoming related by marriage. Well, at least I managed to say no properly, and was thankful she left without further fuss. While I was dealing with this, Candace came home. Is Dad using the car? No, nobody's using it. But the car's not in the parking lot. Blood drained from my face, and I rushed to the window overlooking the parking lot. It was gone. Our car was missing. And the car keys, they were gone too. That woman. She must have stolen the keys while pretending to use the bathroom. That's no different from a thief. I trembled with rage. Mom. My daughter's voice brought me back to my senses. Just wait a moment. I quickly called a taxi and managed to send Candace off. How self-centered is she? Frustrated and unable to focus on housework, I paced around the house alone, waiting for her return. 2 hours later, she returned as if nothing had happened. What were you thinking? I told you it was in use. You stole the keys, and what you did is no different from theft. I burst into the parking lot and opened the driver's side door, unleashing my anger. She briefly distorted her face, but then scoffed through her nose. It's unseemly to scream and yell outside. Who is the one that drove me to this state? She showed no remorse. Realizing arguing further was futile, I glared at her sharply. Surely you haven't damaged it today, have you? Memories of the past incident flashed through my mind, prompting me to check around the car. What are you doing? I didn't hit anything. I'm a good driver. Ignoring her voice from behind, I thoroughly checked the car. It seems like it wasn't hit. Oh, I need to go pick up Candace soon. Suddenly, the fuel gauge caught my eye. Wait, what? There's no gas. Yesterday, there was more than half a tank left, and now it's almost empty. I went on a long trip. She boasted, but I held back my anger and responded. I lent you the car, the least you could do is fill it up with gas. I need to pick up Candace now. If there's no gas, it causes trouble for the next person. Arguing with her is pointless. That's why I tried to explain gently. You don't need to be so stingy. I'm 12 years younger than you. Besides, Ted supports the household financially. You're really greedy. That kind of attitude will make Ted tired of you someday. With those words, she quickly left. She's immune to common sense. How can someone grow up to be so self-centered? Today, I need to make sure Ted speaks to her firmly about this. I made up my mind. When Ted came home, I told him about today's events. It's our car, but we can't use it when we need it. And Ashley, she just took the keys without permission. The more I remembered, the angrier I became. But I tried to explain as calmly as possible. Well, for Ashley, our house is like her own home. No, that doesn't make any sense. I had to rush to get gas because it was nearly empty. And then I went to pick up Candace. Ashley probably hasn't been to a gas station much. What was that supposed to mean? To control my anger, I took a deep breath. This time, I really want you, Ted, to speak to her. She needs to ask for permission before borrowing the car. If she uses it, she should fill it up with gas. Even close relationships require manners. Just overlook it a bit. Ashley is 12 years younger than us. What kind of excuse is that from both of you? My anger exploded. She's 30 years old. A fully grown adult. It's not something to get so angry about. Look, I bought the car with my money. I fill it with gas. As long as I don't think it's a problem, it's fine. His money. I couldn't bring myself to argue anymore. There was a point when Ted was the sole breadwinner. But I took care of everything at home as a stay-at-home mom. And helped keep the family going. When Ted brought colleagues home, I entertained them. I made lunch every day. I managed our finances. And now I even have my own income. Despite that, to hear such words coming from Ted, whom I thought was looking after me and our daughter, I went beyond anger to despair. I've had enough. Just do what you want. We are no longer a happy family. I realized painfully and cried alone in the bath. A few days later, unrepentant, she came again. I won't let the same thing happen. I immediately put the car keys in my pocket. Megan, I'm borrowing the car. I need to use the car now. It's fine, it's fine. She barged into the house and started searching for the car keys. Huh? They're usually here. How audacious of her to openly try to steal the keys. Noticing my disdainful look, Ashley turned red and shouted, "You mean old hag? I'm going to tell Ted." With that, she pulled out her phone and actually started calling Ted, who was at work. He won't answer, he's working. After a while, she smirked briefly and then began to cry. Ted. Megan is being mean and won't lend me the car. Why did you marry someone like this? She then shoved the phone at me. Here, get scolded by Ted. I answered the phone, exasperated. Why don't you tell her not to call for such trivial things? It's not trivial. Ashley is crying. Are you serious? I was at a loss for words. What are you doing, as an adult? Don't hurt my precious sister. It's not hurting her, it's all an act. I need the car, so I can't borrow it. She gets mad and calls you over something so trivial. What? Oh. The sound of a car engine came from outside. While I was distracted on the phone with Ted, she must have stolen the keys from my jacket pocket. Great. I need to leave soon. If you believe everything she says, you're going to regret it. Ted was still saying something on the phone, but I hung up. At night, when Ted came home. Where's the car? Your darling sister took it and hasn't returned it. Stop talking about her like that. We both turned away, irritated. Then, the doorbell rang. Oh. Ted, you were home. I borrowed the car. In front of her brother, Ashley acted sweetly. Sorry, Ashley. Megan isn't very thoughtful. No worries. As a thank you for letting me borrow the car. Megan, I filled it up with gas. What a capable sister. See, Megan, Ashley is considerate. Ted smiles and gently strokes her head. Then I'm heading home. See you later, Ted. See you too, Megan. She smiles warmly at Ted, then gives me a fleeting but eerie grin. What's with that? It gives me the chills. After she leaves, I check the car just in case. No scratches, and just as she said, the gas tank is full. But something bothers me. I can't shake off her creepy smile. Ashley is much more mature. Even if you're mean to her. She returns the car with a full tank. You should learn from her. Ted approaches from behind, grinning. I'm going to check inside the car. What? You still doubt Ashley? I'm seriously going to get angry. Ted is really mad that I question his sister's good intentions. I mean, I would actually prefer to commute by car too. But I endure it because you use it. Hearing Ted's words, I have an idea. Then, I won't use the car tomorrow, so you can commute with it, Ted. Really? Awesome. I have an important meeting first thing in the morning. Lucky the gas is full. I'm looking forward to tomorrow. I watch Ted's back as he happily enters the house. And the next morning. Commuting by car is so comfortable. See you. Ted left the house dressed in his favorite suit for an important meeting. Soon after, a scream came from the parking lot. That girl must have set something up. I went outside, exasperated. Ouch, ouch. What? Ted was making such a fuss that I hesitated a bit. As I approached, I saw that the back of his suit was slashed. Megan, what's going on? The moment I sat down, something stabbed me in the back. What has she done now? Chilled, I checked the driver's seat. And there, in the middle, something shiny caught my eye. It was a razor blade that had been planted. No way. If I had sat there. A chill ran down my spine. What is this supposed to mean? You know it. Since Ashley returned the car last night, no one else has used it. Ted was unconvinced, but he glanced at his watch and gasped. Oh no. I'm going to be late. Ted quickly changed and rushed out of the house. He's not going to make the train. I felt a slight pity for Ted, but what on earth was that girl thinking? Committing something close to a crime so nonchalantly. I must seriously keep my distance from her. Otherwise, it might endanger not just me but also my precious daughter. As I was paralyzed with fear, the phone rang. It was her. Hello. It's your fault, Ted scolded me. She was furious on the other end of the line. Even if she's his sister. This incident really upset him. Finally, Ted seems to have come to his senses. And I feel a bit relieved. But why did you let Ted drive? I set up the razor blade so you would get hurt. She began to blurt out her scheme. I stood my ground and replied to her firmly. Take responsibility. After hanging up, I immediately called someone. That's what happened. Yes, please come over tonight. That person agreed to come to our house this evening. I won't let her do as she pleases any longer. I sat down at my computer and began to work silently. That night. Ted has been on edge ever since he came home. Apparently, he was scolded by his boss for being late to the important meeting. And his favorite suit was ruined, keeping a frown on his face. Where's Candace? She's staying at a friend's house tonight. Not wanting Candace to see the turmoil, I arranged for her to stay at a friend's house nearby. She probably senses something is wrong. I'm on your side, Mom. Her words as she left gave me the strength to remain firm. At that moment, the doorbell rang. Sorry for the late hour. Excuse me. Come on in. It was her husband, Wesley, the person I had called earlier in the day. Yes, I had contacted Wesley, and next to him, she stood pouting, judging it best to report the incident where she could have caused harm. I disclosed everything that had happened so far. I'm truly sorry for the inconvenience my wife has caused. I heard she occasionally borrowed your car. I had given her money for gas. But it seems she didn't pass it on? Yes, she never accepted any money. Wesley glared at her. Ashley. What's going on? Where's the gas money? How frequently did you need to use the car? Always calm, Wesley raised his voice, and Ashley distorted her face. Our car has a dash cam, so I know where you went. She panicked at that. It was just shopping. There's a nice shop in the next town. They sell organic and additive-free stuff. I wanted to feed Wesley good food. It's pricey, so I used the gas money for shopping. As she scrambled for excuses, Wesley's gaze turned cold. Who's Sean? What? You were in the car with Sean, weren't you? She fell silent. Tell the truth. The dash cam recorded everything inside the car. I guessed early on that she was cheating. A person who was an inexperienced driver wouldn't go on long trips alone to the point of running out of gas. That intuition led me to check the dashcam. And that's how I discovered the affair. I was willing to keep quiet if she changed her ways. However, Ashley, who managed to get Ted on her side and do whatever she wanted, got increasingly out of control. Eventually, she even committed a crime. So I relentlessly sent the dashcam data to Wesley. She began to sob. It was just a bit of fun. It's because Wesley is always working and never plays with me. And, sobbing, she glared at me. You're really the worst. It would have been better if you were the one who got hurt. Give me a break. At Wesley's shout, she trembled. Megan, I truly apologize. Wesley apologized deeply several times. He didn't do anything wrong. If anything, he's the real victim of her infidelity. I just felt so sorry for him. A person who can easily harm others can't be family. I never imagined the person I loved would do something like this. He must be in shock too. My mind's a mess. I'm sorry, I need to go home first. Wait, Wesley. Hey. Wesley shrugged off her hand and left alone, head bowed. It seemed she finally realized the gravity of the situation as she slumped down. She must have finally realized the extent of her wrongdoing. But there was another person beyond saving. Ashley is not to blame. Wesley is terrible. Ted, who easily lies, steals from others, attempts to injure people with a weapon, cheats and betrays his partner. I felt that Ted, who still defends such a woman, was just as dangerous as her. Ted, what am I to you? No matter how unreasonable she is. You always take her side, right? Even with the affair. She's clearly at fault, so why do you defend her? Ted has been there for me in good times and bad. I was counting on him to see my point, but his response was a real disappointment. After all, you're just a stranger. What's wrong with defending my cute sister who is related by blood? With that defiant response from Ted. That's it, let's end this, us. I quietly decided on divorce. That very day, I contacted my parents. The next day, while Ted was at work, I took Candace and returned to my parents' house. A few days later, Ted noticed that we had left and bombarded me with calls. Reluctantly, I answered and a man over 40 was crying and pleading. Megan, I was wrong. Please don't divorce me. What is he saying now? I firmly refused such a Ted. I don't want to be with someone who doubts his wife. But doesn't Candace need a father? I used to love Dad from the past. But I hate the current dad who doesn't cherish Mom. Rejected by his daughter, Ted was deeply shocked, but it was his own doing. From now on, we'll communicate through lawyers. Through a lawyer introduced by Wesley. We quickly agreed on property division and child support, and a month later, our divorce was finalized. Meanwhile, Wesley also told me that he had decided to divorce Ashley because her cheating was the cause. Wesley claimed $20,000 in compensation from her. I don't really want the money. I just want her to reflect properly. I feel the same. I hope she seriously regrets betraying a partner she's been with for nearly 20 years and faces life properly. Let's both find happiness. It's unlikely that I'll meet Wesley again. At the end, we wished each other happiness with a firm handshake. A year has passed. Mom, can my friend stay over tonight? Is that okay? That's fine. What should we have for dinner? I want your special fried chicken. I want my friend to try it. With such a happy request, I can't help but be enthusiastic. Candace and I looked at each other and laughed. I'm now living with Candace in an apartment, 2 of us. Living at my parents' was comfortable and reassuring. However, since it was quite a distance from Candace's high school, we decided to rent an apartment near her school. Money is okay. In fact, with the jewelry sales I've been continuing, I earn as much as my ex-husband did before our divorce. He didn't know that. Nor did he ever imagine that I was earning that much. That's probably why he was deluded into thinking I'm paying for the car and the gas. I deeply felt that divorcing was the right decision. Ashley, the one causing all the chaos, was kicked out by Wesley. And now she's supposedly living in the small apartment where Ted is staying. Ted, can you lend me some money? Still not working, she shamelessly leeches off Ted. She's likely to repeat the same mistakes. She really needs someone who truly cares for her and can sternly reprimand her. Not someone like Ted who just spoils her. After the divorce, I answered a call from Ted just once. At that time, he finally realized how selfish Ashley's actions were. You made Ashley like this. Take care of your cute sister until the end. And please, stay out of our lives, you strangers. Since then, I haven't been in contact with my ex-husband. I'm walking a new path in life with my daughter, filled with unexpectedly tranquil and small joys. Mom, I'll help make the fried chicken. Really? Yeah. I want to be able to make it like you. Candace and I, giggling, stood together in the kitchen. Then, surrounded by her friends, we enjoyed a lively dinner table. Life is so much better now. I'm so relieved I got a divorce from my ex-husband. I want to be like Mom. What? I'm just an ordinary housewife with no qualifications. When I said that modestly, Candace shook her head. You have a stronger sense of justice than anyone. You always point out what is wrong. I want to be a strong woman like you. She's been watching me closely. I felt a surge of happiness. I can't wait to see what kind of strong woman she will become in the future. I cleaned it up nicely as a thank you. My son's wife Nicole pointed to my car, which she had taken for a ride without permission. Despite her evil grin, the car was indeed polished to a shine. She wasn't lying. But given her past actions, I couldn't help but suspect there was a catch. Don't worry too much. Do you really distrust her that much? I was checking every inch of the car when my husband scolded me. It seemed like he was on Nicole's side. All right, if he's going that far, I'll let him prove it. That she's up to nothing, and then they'll both see hell. My name is Susan Clark, a 48-year-old part-time working housewife. I work as an accountant at a local construction company. It's a small company, but the employees are kind and it's a comfortable place to work. I live with my husband Danny, who turns 49 this year, and our 25-year-old son Ryan. I started working at the current company right after graduating from high school. And I met Danny when I was 21. We met when he approached me while I was drinking at a pub with friends. When I first saw Danny, I thought, why is a celebrity here? That's how handsome he was. Hey, can you give me your number? However, good looks were all he had. He seemed quite the smooth talker. He was so persistent that I reluctantly exchanged numbers. I didn't have a boyfriend at the time, so I ended up meeting Danny occasionally. But our relationship remained just friends. Then one day, I know I started talking to you with the intention of hitting on you. And I might seem like a frivolous man, but I really like you, Susan. Please go out with me, I'm begging you. All right, I can't say no when you put it that way. Really? Thank you, Susan. Touched by Danny's sincere confession, I agreed to date him. Seeing him jump around joyfully like a child at my response, I thought. After that, things progressed smoothly, and we got married when I was 22. Right after our wedding, I found out I was pregnant. And we were blessed with our son, Ryan. I'm so happy. Danny said this sentimentally while holding our newborn Ryan. I felt the same. But this happiness was soon to be shattered. After Ryan was born, I took maternity leave. Although it's a small company, they have good employee benefits. Maternity leave or not, there's no break at all. The first time parenting was full of unknowns and was tough. However, Danny didn't help at all. I don't really understand this stuff, and I'm bad at it. Susan, you're handy, and it's faster if you do it alone. With that excuse, he didn't help with childcare or even household chores. I had seen hints of his laziness when we were dating. But it became more apparent after Ryan was born. I think part of the reason was that I was stressed out, but still, he was too unhelpful. In such circumstances, I had to do everything regarding childcare on my own. Both our parents lived far away, and we couldn't rely on them. That's when I thought it might be better to send him to daycare earlier than planned, one day. Sorry, Susan. I quit my job. What? I couldn't help but shout out loud. When I asked Danny what happened, it seemed he had been in conflict with his boss for a while, and they finally had a big argument. In a fit of anger, Danny had slammed his resignation letter on the table and came home. I hate working under that guy. If this continues, I might end up mentally ill. Don't worry, I'll start job hunting right away. Susan, just keep doing the childcare like you have always been. With his usual light tone, Danny said this. But does this man really have a sense of being a parent? I was filled with great unease and frustration. And my fears were realized. After quitting his job, Danny just lazed around at home. He continued not to do any housework or childcare. This situation lasted for almost a month, and I reached my limit of patience. If you don't start working, I'm filing for divorce. Realizing I was seriously angry, Danny panicked and started job hunting. Being still young, he found a new job quickly. However, the salary was lower than at his previous job. Danny's salary alone isn't enough. Realizing this, I proceeded with Ryan's nursery school enrollment and ended my maternity leave earlier than planned. Dragging my exhausted postpartum body, I began a hectic life of work, childcare, and household chores. However, unaware of my struggles, Danny continued to switch jobs frequently. I quit my job again. After hearing this multiple times, I no longer had the energy to respond. Fortunately, by the time Ryan started elementary school, I had been promoted to section chief, so I was earning a decent salary. I had grown accustomed to the busy life of work, housework, and childcare. And I could even think this lifestyle wasn't so bad. As I watched over him, Ryan grew up healthy. Since Danny hadn't been involved much in parenting, Ryan wasn't very attached to him. Unaware of this, Danny continued to invite him to play with the wrong sense of distance, which led to Ryan completely disliking him as he entered his rebellious phase in junior high. Although Ryan and Danny didn't have a great relationship, my son didn't cause any particular problems and progressed through high school. It's somewhat worrying that he hasn't had any dating experience despite being a high school student, which is rare nowadays. But that's a matter for him, and I have no right to interfere. Ryan went on to college and successfully became a working adult. Phew, Ryan is finally on his own. Man, it was tough. Danny acted as if he had done a big job himself. By this time, I had stopped reacting to Danny's behavior and remarks altogether. And 3 years after Ryan became a working adult, he brought home his first girlfriend as his fiancée. Nice to meet you, I'm Nicole. Nice to meet you. His fiancée Nicole was a flashy-looking girl, typical of young people today. Their meeting was at a pub, just like Danny and I, but Nicole had approached Ryan. Ryan is really handsome. I fell in love at first sight. Now that I've met his parents, I see he takes after his father. You're even more handsome than him. And I'm so jealous of your wife. Is that so? Danny was visibly pleased to be praised by a younger person. Indeed, Danny had maintained a youthful appearance despite being in his 40s. He doesn't stick with jobs for long, but he never neglects his efforts to look good. Afterwards, they registered their marriage and had a wedding ceremony. Before the ceremony, we met Nicole's parents, who were much more put together than one might imagine from their daughter. Her mother is a teacher, her father a police officer. I could see why. They repeatedly scolded her to behave properly. They seemed to like my earnest son, Ryan. Nicole was a surprising choice for the reserved Ryan to bring home. But he looked genuinely happy. Although it's a bit lonely, as long as Ryan is happy, it feels like all my effort in raising him was worth it. I was thinking about preparing for our retirement while praying for their happiness when... Hi, Mother, I've come to visit again. Oh, can I borrow this? Nicole, I've told you many times to call before coming. You never listen, do you? Nicole, whether out of friendliness or lack of boundaries, got too close too comfortably. Even with me, her mother-in-law. It's better than a hostile relationship. But her unannounced visits and frequent borrowing of my things, especially expensive brands like bags and accessories, were troubling. I don't make much from my part-time job, so I really admire these brand items, she would say, but her frequent borrowing was indeed a problem. She often returned things dirty. However, because she is Ryan's wife, I couldn't be too stern, and this laissez-faire attitude continued. Then Nicole, perhaps thinking I would never get angry, began entering our house uninvited and taking things. Eventually, she started taking my car without permission. Your car is so cool since it's foreign. It feels great driving it around town. She said this nonchalantly. However, my car insurance only covers me. Since Danny doesn't have a car, he uses a one-day insurance when needed. But Nicole, without any insurance, just took my car and drove around. I told her many times to stop, but she wouldn't listen. Finally, I reached my limit and decided to sternly warn Nicole. Nicole, please stop using the car. The insurance is set only for me. And if you have an accident, it won't cover you. She quickly started tearing up. Do you think I'm such a bad driver that I would cause an accident? No, that's not what I mean. Mother, that's horrible. I can't believe you don't trust me. Nicole then buried her face in her hands and began to cry loudly. Danny saw this and scolded me while comforting her. Okay, don't cry. You didn't have to go that far. Besides, it's just a car, let her use it. I'm upset because she takes it without asking. Just let it go. We're family, aren't we? Don't get so worked up over everything. A family member does. You're too narrow-minded. While Danny scolded me, I caught a glimpse of Nicole's face. The corners of her mouth were twisted into a smirk. A month after this incident, I started carrying the car keys with me at all times to prevent Nicole from taking the car. Thanks to this, the car was no longer taken, but Nicole seemed unhappy about it. I'd be in big trouble if there was an accident. When I returned home, I made sure to place the car keys back in their usual spot at the entrance. However, one day, I forgot to take the keys with me and left them at the entrance. Nicole did not miss this opportunity and once again took my car without permission. Oh, that girl. When I noticed my beloved car missing from the parking lot, I couldn't help but raise my voice. When Nicole returned, I approached her with an angry expression. Nicole, how many times have I told you not to take it without asking? In the face of my fury, Nicole quickly apologized. I'm sorry. I really needed the car for something. Normally, Nicole would make excuses, but this time she apologized sincerely. And I was momentarily stunned. Ignoring my reaction, Nicole took something out of her bag and handed it to me. This is some sweets as an apology. Also, I cleaned the car as a thank you for lending it to me. When I checked the car, it was indeed polished to a shine. Even the tires, which I had been thinking needed cleaning, were spotless. Caught off guard by this unexpected gesture, my anger subsided. Ah, well, thanks for cleaning it. But don't borrow it again, okay? Okay, I understand. Nicole smiled cheerfully. Seeing her smile, I couldn't help but feel suspicious. Nicole had never seriously listened to my warnings before. No matter how many times I cautioned her, she would ignore them and quickly forget. It seemed impossible that she would suddenly start listening now. After Nicole left, I started checking the car thoroughly. I'm home. What are you doing? Just then, Danny returned. Seeing me inspecting the car closely, he frowned deeply. Nicole took the car again without asking, and I feel something's off. I'm just checking to see if there's anything wrong. Then, with a heavy sigh and a tone tinged with anger, Danny scolded me. You worry too much, don't you? Or do you really not trust Nicole that much? I've thought this before, but your personality is too harsh. Keep that up. And you'll be called a mean mother-in-law someday. At Danny's words, something inside me snapped. Ah, is that so? Let's test that theory. Huh? Did you say something? No, nothing. My quiet voice didn't reach Danny. If I continued to inspect the car, Danny would only scold me more loudly. I decided to stop and went back inside the house. Oh, by the way, can I use this car next week? I told you I'm going on a trip with friends, right? I'd like to drive it then. Yes, that's fine. I answered with a smile. Danny casually thanked me and went back inside the house with me. On the day of Danny's trip, an hour after he left, I received a phone call. Hello, yes? I heard Danny's panicked voice over the phone. Susan. Help me. What happened? My car tire's gone flat. After further inquiry, Danny, who had gone on a trip, explained that he had just gotten onto the highway when he started hearing a strange noise from the tire. Thinking it was serious, he immediately headed to the nearest service area. When he parked and checked, it turned out a nail had punctured the tire. What should I do in this situation? So, a grown man doesn't know what to do about a flat tire and calls me? I reply with deep exasperation. You should call AAA. I have a membership, and they should cover family members too. Okay, give me AAA's number then. Seriously. Why do I have to handle everything? You can look it up on that smartphone you're holding. Or maybe ask that mistress of yours sitting next to you to look it up? At the mention of a mistress, Danny on the other end of the line went silent. I didn't let up. Why are you surprised? I knew you were on a trip with your mistress. Indeed, Danny had been having an affair since around the time Ryan got married. He thought he was being discreet, but it was obvious from his soap-scented cheerful returns and suddenly frequent late nights due to overtime. However, I didn't immediately look into Danny's infidelity. Though I no longer felt love for him, I thought it would be too troublesome if challenging his infidelity dramatically changed our lives. In short, I was too averse to the hassle to correct Danny and had been ignoring his affair. But then, perhaps needing money for his escapades, Danny started to steal money from my purse. When he thought I hadn't noticed, he grew bolder and stole larger amounts. That's when I quietly began my own investigation, collecting evidence of his infidelity. While I was willing to overlook his actions if there was no real harm, once he started dipping into the money I worked hard to earn, it became a different story. Yet, Danny, unaware that I was investigating his cheating, desperately tried to cover it up. Cheating? What are you talking about? I would never do such a thing. I'm just on a trip with a male friend today. Over the phone, Danny feigned ignorance. Then, someone tapped him on the shoulder. Really? Can you say the same thing while looking me in the eyes? Susan. Why are you here? Indeed, it was I who had tapped Danny's shoulder. He looked as shocked as I'd ever seen him in our long marriage. Immediately after, his face turned as blue as the sky today. Susan, let's talk over there. Pale-faced, Danny grabbed my arm, trying to pull me away as if to save me from something. But it was futile. Hey Danny, what about the car? A familiar flippant voice reached my ears. I slowly turned to face its owner. Hello, Nicole. It's such a nice day, isn't it? Perfect for a cheating trip. Seeing me, Nicole's face initially registered disbelief, then quickly turned as pale as Danny's. Oh, mother. What are you doing here? I was just out for a drive with your husband because I wanted to visit a place, and he offered to drive. Nicole scrambled for an excuse, but her words halted when a third person intervened. Really? So this little outing of yours requires a big suitcase? You never take more than a small bag when you go out with me. Ryan. Why are you here? As Nicole's voice filled with despair, Ryan replied with a smile. I knew you were cheating. Mom and I followed you here in my car, planning to confront you too on your cheating trip. But who knew the car tire would blow? Ryan glanced at Danny as he spoke. Danny, shaking slightly, returned his gaze. Wait, Ryan. Isn't there some misunderstanding? Just like Nicole said. We were just out for a little trip. Huh? But you said you were going on a trip with friends and asked to borrow the car. Your story doesn't add up. I interjected, and Danny stuttered in response. Well, that. If I said I was going out with Nicole, you'd all suspect the worst like now. So I lied about the friends. But I should have been honest from the start. Right, Nicole? Danny's desperate excuses were met with nods from Nicole, but Ryan and I immediately dismissed them. We know you two are cheating. Please spare us the unsavory excuses. Danny may look good on the outside. Throughout our marriage, it became clear Nicole is quite the looker. When Nicole first met Danny, he had the eyes of a man interested in a woman. I had a bad feeling seeing that look. When I learned of Danny's affair, I felt crushed by the lowest of expectations. Could it be that Nicole, my son's wife, was his mistress? After the affair came to light, this thought haunted me, tormenting me. I hope my suspicions are wrong. I prayed as I investigated Danny's cheating. But my prayers were betrayed. And it turned out that my husband's mistress was indeed my son's wife. What should I do? If it had been some unknown woman, I would have slapped Danny with divorce papers without hesitation. But the other party was Ryan's wife. If I made a fuss, Ryan would find out. For a moment, I considered pretending I hadn't seen anything. If I kept quiet, Ryan could avoid unhappiness. I was seriously contemplating this when Ryan visited our house and said something startling with a grave expression. Mom, please calm down and listen. Nicole and Dad are having an affair. It turned out Ryan also knew about the affair. Recently, Nicole had been returning late from her part-time job and spending her days off out and about, which gradually raised his suspicions. Suspecting his wife, Ryan hired a detective agency to conduct an infidelity investigation. Then, proof after proof of the affair came out. And Ryan shockingly learned that his own father was the mistress's lover. It was quite a shock at first, but as I calmed down, I started to think that it was just like Dad. He only looks good on the outside, right? I've had to listen to him bragging about how popular he is all the time. And, I hate to say it, Mom, but he's not a good father to me. I see him as someone who could easily do something like this. Hearing Ryan say this made me feel both pathetic and apologetic. And I couldn't help but tear up. I'm sorry, was it too shocking? I just blurted it out without considering your feelings. No, Ryan. It's not that I'm shocked that he cheated, but the fact that it was with your wife. I'm so sorry I made him your father. This is my responsibility too. Ryan shook his head in response to my confession. No, Mom, you're not to blame. The ones at fault are those two. Nicole was the first woman I ever dated, and I was blind to her. I even thought her selfishness was cute, and I overlooked a lot. But now, it's a different story. I can never forgive them. Anger flared in Ryan's eyes. Seeing this, I nodded firmly. That's what happened. We have solid evidence collected by me and the detective agency. So, please spare us any more unpleasant excuses. As I said this, I looked at my car, used in the affair, and sighed. I had secretly installed a tracking tag on this car for today. But who would have thought the tire would blow out during their cheating trip? The car's tire blew out. Nicole, who had been stunned until now, suddenly panicked and checked the car's tire. Then, turning back to me furiously, she said, "Hey, why didn't you change the car's tire? If a nail was stuck, you'd normally notice it right away, wouldn't you?" Notice? What exactly? That day you deliberately put a nail in my car's tire? Nicole's face turned into a regretful expression at my words. Ryan, looking puzzled, asked what that meant. "This girl, she took my car out again last week. But on that day, she returned it sparkling clean and even brought me a box of sweets to apologize. I thought something was off, but I never imagined she'd retaliate by putting a nail in the tire because I had been nagging her. That day, I hadn't noticed the nail in the tire because I was scolded by Danny. But I had a hunch that something had been tampered with in the car. Just then, Danny had asked to borrow the car. So I let him find out for himself what Nicole had done. I never imagined it would turn out this way." "I see. So her spite ended up digging her own grave." Ryan looked coldly at Nicole. Her affair was out. And so was the fact that she had damaged my car. Nicole started sweating profusely. "Well, we should wrap this up here. Danny, I'm divorcing you. And I will be seeking compensation, so be prepared. I'm also divorcing Nicole and will be seeking compensation. I will never forgive you too, so brace yourselves." The word divorce triggered a panic in Danny and Nicole. "Susan, please reconsider. This was just a momentary lapse of judgment." "A momentary lapse? You were quite infatuated with Nicole. You even stole money from my purse to lavish on her." "Wow, what? Dad, you did that too? I thought there was nothing lower you could go. But this is a new record. You're stealing money because you can't earn enough yourself?" Ryan's scornful voice made Danny alternate between red and pale. As Danny struggled, Ryan turned his gaze from the trembling Nicole and continued. "I never thought you could be such a person. My lack of experience with women must have played a part." "No, it's not true, Ryan. He forced me into it. I didn't want to cheat." Nicole screamed and then covered her face with her hands. A typical move of hers to feign tears. Ryan, unfazed, continued coldly. "Enough of that. It's embarrassing to watch you cry and pretend at your age. The evidence collected by the detective proves you enjoyed the affair. And you cheated with more than just that guy, didn't you?" Ryan finally referred to his own father as that guy. But more troubling than that was the information his son revealed. "Wait, Nicole had other partners too?" "Yeah. The detective found at least 5 others. It's almost impressive how she managed them all at the same time." Further accusations of cheating left Nicole speechless as she stared wide-eyed at Ryan. "You knew all that. The detective agency is more competent than you think. We'll be using this evidence when we claim compensation." Ryan signaled me with his eyes, and I nodded before presenting Danny with the already filled-out divorce papers. Ryan also took out his filled-out divorce forms from his bag and handed them to Nicole. "We'll be leaving now. Please sign these divorce papers. If you refuse to divorce, both Mom and I will hire lawyers and take this to court. I recommend you sign peacefully without any futile resistance." As we turned to leave, the desperate cheating pair tried to stop us. "Wait, Susan. Please forgive me. I won't do it again." "Do you really think I'd believe that? If so, you're incredibly naive. Any affection I had for you is gone, and now you're nothing but an object of my hatred. Don't make me listen to your unpleasant voice anymore. I might just hit you in anger." Shocked by my harsh words, Danny collapsed to the ground. "Wait, Ryan. The car's not moving. Are you leaving us here?" "That's the plan. I don't want dirty people like you in my car. It would just get filthy. Figure it out yourselves." With that, Ryan and I got into the car. We left Danny and Nicole, who looked utterly despaired, at the service area. Later, they called AAA to tow the car and managed to get off the highway by taxi. But when Danny returned, he couldn't enter our house because I had chained the door. Danny cried and apologized outside the door, but I ignored it all. Eventually, he gave up and left, apparently finding refuge at a nearby motel. Nicole, too, was locked out by Ryan. Without money, she had to ask Danny to pay for her stay at the motel. The next day, Ryan and I called them to our house and demanded they submit the divorce papers. "I'm sorry, please forgive me. We won't do it again." Both of them were crying and begging for forgiveness. But Ryan and I could not forgive them. "It can't be helped. We'll hire a lawyer and discuss this further." Realizing I was serious, they tearfully signed the divorce papers. "Here, I've packed your things. Since the house and land are in my name, it's obvious that you should be the one to leave. I've also packed your immediate belongings. That apartment is in my name, so it's not your home anymore." Both of them received their belongings from us and lost their places to live. Danny, having nowhere else to go, returned to his parents' home. But his brother and sister-in-law were living there. I had already explained the situation to them, so they welcomed Danny with disdain. They agreed to let him stay for 2 months. If he overstayed, they would mercilessly kick him out. As for Nicole, she tried to return to her strict parents' home. But they refused to let her cross the threshold, saying that a daughter who cheats and returns is not their daughter. She struggled for a while, moving between friends' houses and motel, and eventually settled in a shabby apartment. Around this time, Ryan demanded compensation from her, making her life quite difficult. Danny also managed to find a place to live. But since I had also demanded compensation from him, his main job's earnings weren't enough, and he was barely getting by with part-time jobs. Knowing his low earning capacity, I had agreed to installment payments. But I warned him that any delay in payments would be met without mercy, and I would seize his wages if necessary. Meanwhile, Ryan and I, having divorced our partners, were starting new lives. I thought we might be depressed after the divorces, but that wasn't the case at all. I didn't realize it, but Nicole's presence had become a stress for me. After the divorce, both my work and private life improved. Me too. I found myself thinking that I should have divorced sooner. Life without having to take care of Danny is much easier. I'm surprisingly enjoying living alone, and I think I'm done with marriage. While Ryan is still young and it's unclear what will happen if he brings home a partner, I plan to celebrate wholeheartedly. Life is full of unexpected events. But this experience taught me that if you don't give up, good things will surely come. Drop dead already, hag. Never come back. Ouch. During my hospital stay for cancer, Lauren threw hot tea on me. The back of my right hand was stinging from the tea. You see what happens when you go against me? Ah, I should have never moved in with the hag in the first place. I had been doing the housework exactly as Lauren had told me to. Yet, why do I have to suffer like this? I quickly pressed the nurse call button. Mom, is it true you got discharged today? Steve called me, panicked. It seems he went to visit my empty hospital room without knowing the discharge date. Mom, where are you right now? If you'd told me, I would have come to pick you up. Steve must be assuming I'm coming back home. Sorry, but I don't plan to live with you guys anymore. I made that clear. I am Barbara Ford, 67 years old. My husband passed away 2 years ago. And since then, I've been living alone. My children are Steve, my 43-year-old eldest son, and Heather, my 40-year-old eldest daughter. Both got married about 10 years ago and have since moved out of the family home. They keep in touch regularly, so as a mother, I felt reassured. One day, Steve proposed that we live together. Mom, you've been alone since Dad died, right? You'll be 70 soon. Why don't you live with us? Steve must be worried about me. To be honest, I was happy about his proposal. The thought of living alone for the rest of my life was daunting, especially not knowing how long I'd be healthy. But I couldn't just say I wanted to live with him. So, Steve's invitation was very welcome. However, I couldn't agree immediately, as Steve has his own family too. His wife, Lauren, for years his junior, seemed to dislike me from the start. Ah, Mother, nice to meet you. Lauren always looked at me coldly. I couldn't imagine her happily accepting to live with me. It's nice that Steve is suggesting it, but I wonder if Lauren would be against it. I asked them to discuss it thoroughly as a couple. Yet, Steve still wanted to live together. Actually, Lauren has agreed too. We have a spare room and she said, "We'd really like you to come." Really? It's hard to believe that Lauren would accept living with me. But I can't imagine Steve lying. After much thought, I decided to move in with Steve and his wife. After consulting both Steve and Heather, we decided to sell the family home. Everything was going smoothly until I moved into Steve's house and faced Lauren's baptism of fire. Mother, it's been a while. I look forward to living with you starting today. On the first day, Lauren greeted me with a smile. But the next day, as soon as Steve left for work, she changed completely. Hey, do the dishes, please. Oh, and the laundry too. Lauren dumped all the housework on me. No matter if we were living together. Why should I be the one to do everything? Her attitude was shocking, and I stood there dumbfounded. Lauren had quit her job as soon as she married, and had been a housewife ever since. Although Steve had initially thought they would both work, Lauren opposed it. If Lauren were working, I might have taken on some household duties. But she pushed her work onto me and started lounging on the sofa. Lauren, shouldn't we share the housework? Handling housework for 3 people gets busy every day. I suggested this gently to avoid upsetting Lauren. But as soon as I spoke, she glared at me with narrowed eyes. Listen, I agreed to live with you to dump the housework on you. We're letting you live here, aren't we? Now that the family home is sold, you have nowhere to go. You think it's okay to defy me? Please don't say that. We're family, aren't we? What? To me, you're nothing but a stranger. Steve should just ignore such a mother. Laughing mockingly, Lauren continued to order me around. If I had known this, I would have realized there was a catch to living with her. Why did I ever agree to live with her? As I hung my head, Lauren raised her voice. Hey, don't slack off. Go do the grocery shopping for dinner. From that day began my hellish days. But I couldn't just let her keep pushing me around. Disgusted by Lauren's attitude, I immediately consulted Steve. However, Steve hesitated and mumbled his words. Well, maybe. Lauren's just tense since she started living with you. What are you talking about? Do you think a tense person would exploit their mother-in-law? But from what I see, I think Lauren is kind to you. Saying that, Steve gave a wry smile. The truth is, Lauren acts differently in front of Steve. She never bullies me when he's home. It's only when he's away at work that she scolds me. So, let's just see how things go for a bit longer. Steve seemed troubled and quickly left the conversation. If even my own son Steve won't support me, who can I rely on? I would have been better off living alone at my family home. Lauren continued to berate me, her behavior only getting worse each day. Hey! What's this? You haven't cleaned at all. Are you mocking housework? Even though you say that. I did sweep properly? Shut up. Clean it again. Lauren treated me like a servant. At first, I tried to ignore her, but as the days went on, even I began to wear down. Why am I here? Why am I listening to Lauren? Overwhelmed by frustration, there were days I cried in silence. Meanwhile, Lauren dumped the housework on me and visited nail and beauty salons. I, unlike some old hag, value taking care of myself. Well, a hag like you wouldn't understand that, would you? Saying that, Lauren left the house 2 or 3 days a week for the salon. But surely, that was too often even for a salon. I was suspicious of Lauren's actions. However, if I asked about the salon, she would likely fly into a rage. Knowing this, I quietly watched Lauren leave. And when she returned, she would always complain about my housework. Hey, hag! My shirt isn't ironed at all. Don't do things half-heartedly. Now, hurry up and iron it. I understand, I'm sorry. Lauren's words became increasingly harsh. And gradually calling me old hag became the norm. By that time, I no longer had the energy to argue back. It was easier to just follow her orders. Even though I felt that way, I could tell that I was mentally and physically wearing down. How long would these days continue? Although I had consulted Steve several times, he still said nothing to Lauren. Instead, it seemed he thought there was a problem with my behavior. Mom, aren't you being too hard on Lauren? She's trying her best. So please don't be too strict. I want you two to get along. The moment he said that, I gave up on relying on Steve. He wasn't worried about me at all. I realized that consulting him was pointless. And about half a year after moving in with them, my body finally gave out. One day, after Lauren had left the house, I was doing housework when suddenly I lost consciousness and collapsed. Fortunately, Steve returned home a few minutes later and immediately took me to the hospital. The diagnosis given by the doctor was colon cancer. The word cancer weighed heavily on my mind. However, my cancer was stage 2. The doctor said that there was a chance of recovery with surgery, which gave me some hope. Now was not the time to be pessimistic. I had to face forward and fight the cancer. Thus, my hospitalization began. The next day, Steve came to visit me with a change of clothes. I was shocked to find you had collapsed when I got home. Thank you, Steve. It would have been terrible if you hadn't called an ambulance. It really caused a stir. Please recover quickly and come home. Lauren hardly does any housework, so it's tough. We both rely on you, Mom. As he said this, Steve chuckled. Could it be that he was planning to have me do the housework immediately after I was discharged? Steve had been with me when the cancer was diagnosed. His remark was knowing that I had cancer. I was horrified by his thoughts. It seemed he still had no concern for me, even in this state. Then, suddenly, Steve changed the subject. By the way, Lauren wasn't here when you collapsed, right? I asked her. And she said she went shopping, but recently. Haven't you been the one handling the shopping? Steve seemed to have a vague sense that Lauren was pushing the housework onto me. That's why he found it odd that she said she was out shopping. It seems Lauren has been keeping her visits to the nail and beauty salons from Steve. So, I told Steve everything about Lauren's behavior up to now. What? Is that really true? Lauren doing such things? I can't believe it. Steve looked confused. Anyone would be surprised to hear that his wife was frequently visiting salons. The next day, Lauren came to visit me at the hospital. Well, it wasn't really a visit. So, you've been telling Steve unnecessary things, huh? From the moment she entered the room, Lauren's face was like that of a demon. It seems she was grilled by Steve the previous day. You've made Steve suspicious because of you. How are you going to take responsibility for that? As she said this, Lauren approached me. Then I noticed she was holding a paper cup for some reason. Lauren, please calm down. I tried to soothe her by speaking slowly. But in that instant, drop dead already, hag. Never come back. Ouch. Lauren threw the hot tea she had brought in a paper cup at me. She probably filled it from the self-service area in the lobby and deliberately brought it all the way here. Even if she hated me, would she go this far? I instinctively shielded my face and body with my hands, which resulted in a large amount of tea spilling onto the back of my right hand. It felt painfully hot, perhaps burnt. Lauren looked at me with a smirk. You see what happens when you go against me? Ah, I should have never moved in with the hag in the first place. I had always done the housework exactly as Lauren had told me. Yet, why do I have to endure this? I quickly pressed the nurse call button. I didn't know what Lauren would do next. I wanted her out of the room as soon as possible. Lauren, probably realizing that it would be bad if the nurses came. Then, don't ever get involved with me again. With those words, Lauren left the hospital room and fled. Thanks to the nurses who arrived promptly, my burns were minor. However, this incident was absolutely unforgivable. I explained the situation to the hospital staff and asked them to prevent Lauren from entering my room in the future. And on the day before my surgery, my daughter Heather came to visit me. Mom, are you okay? Having lived through turbulent days, Heather's gentle smile comforted me. Her visit allowed me to forget about Lauren and Steve and face the surgery. 10 days later, I was discharged from the hospital. That evening, Steve called me. Mom, did you really get discharged today? Apparently, he had gone to visit my empty hospital room. I hadn't informed Steve about my discharge date. Yes, the surgery was successful. I somehow managed to get discharged. That's good, but... Mom, where are you now? If you had told me, I would have come to pick you up. Are you in a taxi? Steve probably assumed I was coming back to their home. Sorry, but I don't plan to live with you guys anymore. I answered him decisively. Over the phone, Steve seemed surprised, at a loss for words. In fact, the day before the surgery, I had told Heather everything about Steve and his wife. I probably couldn't bear it anymore. Heather was even angrier than I was. What? That's unbelievable with Lauren, but Steve is also weird. How can he treat Mom like that? Unforgivable. Then Heather proposed that I should move out of Steve's house and live with her. I had been considering living with you, Mom. But since Tony and I both work, I was worried about the household chores burden falling on you. That's why I couldn't bring it up. I'm sorry. It's not something you should apologize for, Heather. I'm sorry for causing you concern. But please discuss it properly with Tony. I can manage on my own. There was a chance that Heather's husband, Tony, might reject the idea of living with me. No matter how grateful the offer, it might not work out well. Living with Steve and Lauren had taught me that. I couldn't immediately agree to Heather's suggestion. However, Heather, sensing my apprehensive mood, brought Tony to visit me several times before I was discharged. Tony also agrees with living together. So don't worry, it will be all right. Since I've already lost my parents, I truly appreciate a mother who keeps in touch and cares. So, why not live together? Because Tony had lost his parents. He couldn't believe how Steve could dismiss his own mother. The two of them reassured me by discussing how we would share household duties. After living together, perhaps I could live with Heather and Tony. Thinking this, I went to Heather's house in her car after being discharged. I'll come to pick up my belongings at your house once I've recovered a bit more. Please keep them until then, okay? Wait a minute. Why didn't you consult me? Shouldn't we discuss and decide these things together? Steve whispered weakly over the phone. He must really want me to come back, having repeatedly asked me to reconsider. But it was Steve who hadn't taken my concerns seriously whenever I consulted him. No matter what I said, you were always on Lauren's side. That's why I thought it was pointless to consult you. Besides, Lauren told me not to come back. As I murmured this, I heard Steve gasp. What? Steve apparently didn't even know that Lauren had been to the hospital. I told him about the recent incident where Lauren threw tea on me and told me to drop dead. That's not true, right? Please tell me it's not true, Steve asked, his voice trembling. Unfortunately, everything I said was the truth. Lauren seems to really dislike me. It's impossible to live with someone like that, so please give up. Why would? Steve muttered in a dispirited voice. He probably never imagined Lauren could say such terrible things. I'm sorry, Mom. I apologize, so please reconsider. Though Steve apologized several times afterwards, his apologies now couldn't change my mind. I firmly told him I would be living with Heather from now on and hung up. Then, the following week, Steve unexpectedly showed up at our house with Lauren. Mom, let's talk properly once, Steve said, hanging his head at the entrance. However, it was inconvenient for them to come without notice. Look, Mom just got discharged. It's really inconsiderate to just show up suddenly, even if we are family. Heather handled it for me, telling them to leave. But Steve was persistent and wouldn't back down, causing trouble for Heather. With no other choice, I let them into the entranceway. What do you want? You could have at least called in advance. I thought you and Heather wouldn't agree to meet if I called. So, I took a chance and stormed over here. Really sorry, it was our fault. Come on, Lauren, apologize to Mom. With that, Steve made Lauren apologize. He had confronted Lauren and found out that the tea incident and the hurtful words were true. Steve apologized to me repeatedly, but Lauren just stood there, sulking. She was obviously brought here by Steve against her will. Why should I have to apologize? Lauren muttered under her breath, clearly unrepentant. What's with that attitude? Because of you, Mom suffered burns on her hand. And to say drop dead to a family member in the hospital. How could you say such a thing? Heather raised her voice, angered by Lauren's demeanor. Still, Lauren refused to bow her head. It would have been better if they hadn't come at all. I once again advised them to leave. But Steve was insistent. Please, Mom, come back. I won't make you do all the housework anymore. We'll be careful. But it was Lauren who had been pushing the housework onto me. Lauren doesn't seem to feel sorry, does she? If that's the case, I can't live with her. Even if she apologizes, I won't come back. I'm going to live with Heather and Tony. I explained this again to Steve. Then Lauren shouted at me. Come on, it's fine already. Steve, why are you so obsessed with this old hag? She's not coming back no matter what. I'll do the housework, so let's just give up and go home. Old hag. Stay calm, Heather. I'm all right. Heather, face red with anger, glared at Lauren. Yet Lauren continued to speak spitefully. I'm actually very grateful to Heather and her family for taking this old hag. It's been a real nuisance having someone who can't even do housework properly sticking around. While saying this, Lauren even showed a smirk. Had she come here just to upset us? Don't joke around. How can you say such things to Mom? That's right. Lauren, that's going too far. Steve grimaced, trying to stop Lauren. He must have realized bringing her here was a mistake. Then Heather sighed deeply in response to Steve's words. Look, Steve. When are you going to tell the truth? You're still keeping quiet about that thing, right? What? What are you talking about? It's pointless to hide it. I've heard everything from Mom. At that moment, Steve's face twisted, and he looked at me as if to say, why did you tell Heather? But hiding it was futile. The truth is the truth. If you find it hard to tell Lauren, shall I say it? Wait. Okay, I'll say it. What? What are you talking about? Lauren, not understanding the full context, looked suspiciously at Steve. Resigned, Steve slowly began to speak. Actually, the reason we've been able to get by is because of the money Mom has been sending us. What? That. Lauren's eyes widened at Steve's admission. In truth, since Lauren quit her job after their marriage, Steve's income had been slightly below the average for his age group, making it difficult to support Lauren as well. But Steve, having his pride as a husband, couldn't ask Lauren to work and ended up calling me instead. Mom, could you lend me some money, just a little? Steve is my precious son. Wanting to help, I immediately sent money. Over time, the frequency increased, and now I send money to Steve's account monthly. Lauren, unaware of this, thought they were living solely on Steve's earnings. I overheard Lauren bragging to friends a few times after they moved in. I caught a high-income husband, lucky me. Thanks to that, I don't have to work at all. Steve being high income is a big misunderstanding. However, even if I told her the truth, Lauren probably wouldn't believe it. That's why I never corrected her misunderstanding. But perhaps the money she was spending on her grooming was mostly what I had sent. I've kept quiet for Steve's sake. Maybe I should have told her sooner. You're joking, right? Steve, this is a joke, isn't it? Unable to accept the truth, Lauren clings to Steve. However, Steve remains silent, only shaking his head. That can't be. I always thought it was Steve's money. But you'll continue to send money, right? We're family after all. Right, Mother. As Steve remains silent, Lauren starts clinging to me. However, I've decided to stop sending money to Steve and his wife. After Lauren threw tea at me, I realized that continuing to support them financially was pointless. I'm sorry, but from now on, you really need to live on Steve's earnings. Wait, Mom. Don't be so cold. It's clear what you're thinking. You only want me back for the money, right? You must have been really worried when this month's money didn't come through, weren't you? That's... Steve clams up, my words hitting too close to home. He probably thought about stopping by an ATM to withdraw money on the way to pick me up from the hospital. It might look like you're apologizing and reflecting. But you're really just worried about the money, aren't you? No, that's not it. You're misunderstanding. You always look away when you lie. It's so obvious, just give up. Steve continues to speak without looking at me, proving his dishonesty. I thought I was doing good by sending them money, but Steve, far from being grateful, took it for granted and didn't help me when I was harassed by Lauren. There's no more money for such a son. I'm sorry, but I have no intention of living with you or sending money ever again. As I say this, not only Steve but also Lauren turns pale. Then, suddenly, Steve starts to kneel. Mom, I'm really sorry. I've been wrong, so please forgive me. I was too harsh on you because of my feelings for Lauren. I've been reflecting. It's useless no matter how much you apologize. Forgiving him now wouldn't help Steve at all. I had to be harsh. Please, forgive me. Getting angry over such a small matter makes you narrow-minded, doesn't it? Wait, Lauren. Steve's face turns even paler at Lauren's unexpected remark. She clearly has no intention of reflecting. A mother should provide money for her children. Why are you holding back? It will go to the children when you pass away anyway. You need to stop. Heather clenches her fists, visibly angry. I stop her. Heather, it's okay. Hey, Lauren, may I ask you something? What? Lauren looks complacent, but her face changes when she hears what I have to say. Why do you spend so much money on grooming? You're not going to say there's another man involved, are you? What are you talking about? Mom, what do you mean? Steve, who had been kneeling, looks up at Lauren. However, Lauren quickly retorts. There's only one reason. It's better for a wife to stay beautiful, right? I'm trying to be beautiful for Steve. There's no other man. Really? Of course. As Steve presses her, Lauren starts to sweat, her eyes darting around, her lips trembling. Seeing her flustered, Steve grows even more suspicious. Lauren, tell me the truth. I mean, what is this? I decide to deliver the final blow by showing Steve a receipt. His face falls in shock the moment he sees it. This is... The receipt was from some lodging facility that a quick internet search would reveal to be dubious. And do you recognize this too? I then show Lauren a message card. She shouts. Why would you have that? It's likely a card from another man, neatly written, Lauren, I love you. Obviously, Steve would recognize it if he had sent it, but he seems to have no recollection. Lauren, explain this. What is this all about? Lauren's face looks like she's about to cry. The evidence I presented was found during cleaning. Accidentally left around the house by Lauren, who probably isn't good at organizing. When I found it, I couldn't help but laugh. You've been cheating all along. No. That's not it. This isn't. Then what is it? Who did you stay with at this inn? Who gave you this message card? Lauren shows a frightened face and then tries to snatch the evidence from me. But Steve grabs her hand and stops her. Stop the nonsense. Explain it yourself. With that, Steve pulls her by the hand, trying to leave. There's no more time to discuss the allowance. Mom, thank you. And I'm really sorry. When I handed over the evidence, Steve apologized again. His expression was filled with a sense of tragedy, making me, as his mother, feel pained. I gathered the evidence for Steve's sake. However, it also resulted in causing him distress. Despite being dismayed by his actions, he's still my precious son. As Steve walked away with Lauren, his figure seemed somewhat lonely. A month later, Steve divorced Lauren. It turned out she had indeed been cheating for a long time. Moreover, before I moved in, she had even brought her affair partner to our house. Knowing this, Steve probably couldn't bear it anymore. After the divorce, he kicked Lauren out and sold the house. Now, Steve has moved into a small apartment and is living modestly. Having perhaps come to a realization through this ordeal, Steve reached out to me. I really owe you an apology, Mom. It might take some time, but I'll pay back all the money you sent me. Hearing these words warmed my heart. Perhaps Steve was genuinely reflecting and trying to move forward. Although we are keeping our distance for now, I hope to laugh together with him again someday. Steve also updated me on Lauren's situation. After being kicked out, she first went back to her parents' house. However, Steve had informed his in-laws of the reasons for their divorce. Consequently, they were furious and kicked Lauren out too. Now, I heard that Lauren is living alone in a cheap apartment someone introduced her to. Because Steve demanded compensation. She is working multiple part-time jobs to make the payments. She seems to be aiming for a full-time position, but it doesn't seem to be going well. Recently, I accidentally saw Lauren in despair in front of a job center. She looked thinner and paler than before. While I still can't forgive her, I hope she takes care of her health. As for me, I'm living with Heather and her husband. I'm still undergoing medical treatments, but my cancer hasn't recurred. Gradually, I feel like my strength is returning. Probably thanks to Heather and her husband. Their care makes my days enjoyable, which is why I want to do anything for them. They have welcomed me into their lives. I plan to continue watching over my children's growth and live a long life. My name is Anya. My world took a sharp turn when I turned 15. Around that time, my mom decided to give love another go. This time with a man who had a son from his first marriage. Derek, a whole 4 years older than me, was already 19. Let's just say we didn't exactly click right away. The ink on their marriage license was barely dry when the tension started building. At first, it was just those little annoyances that come up when strangers are suddenly told their family and forced to live together. Derek had a habit of leaving dirty socks on the living room floor, figuring they'd magically disappear. Of course, I was the one who got lectured by my mom or my new stepdad, Mark, about being more considerate of shared spaces. Or I'd notice my fancy moisturizer vanishing faster than usual, only to find Derek sporting suspiciously dewy skin that seemed to have come courtesy of my favorite product. It sounds petty, but it bothered me on more than just a superficial level. Mark, my stepdad, always seemed to take Derek's side. I was always the problem. If something went wrong, he automatically assumed I was responsible, without even asking. And my mom? She was so focused on making this blended family thing work that she didn't see what was happening. She'd brush things off, make excuses for Derek, pretend everything was perfect. I could feel the shift in expectations immediately. About a year into our challenging living arrangement, Mom and Mark announced they were expecting a baby. That's when everything really changed. Suddenly, everything revolved around the new arrival. The house needed renovations, and guess which room was chosen for the nursery? Yup, mine. I was crammed into a small, airless den with barely enough space for my things. It felt like a demotion, a clear sign of where I stood in this new family pecking order. A few months later, Finn, my new half-brother, was born and quickly became the center of attention. Derek felt the shift, too, and somehow became even more entitled. He dropped out of community college and moved back home, bringing a parade of late-night parties and questionable friends who came and went at all hours. Mark waved away my complaints about the noise and mess, while my mom just looked sad, as if to say, "What can we do?" It was infuriating. I started spending more and more time at my friend's house, anywhere I could find some peace and quiet. School became my refuge. I stayed as late as possible, joining every club and taking extra classes. It wasn't just teenage rebellion, it was about survival. Home became a place where I constantly felt like I was walking on eggshells, waiting for the next explosion. It was suffocating. One evening stands out vividly in my mind. I came home later than usual to find the house completely dark and silent. A note on the fridge said they'd all gone out to dinner without me. I hadn't even been invited to this family meal. That note hit harder than it should have. I felt invisible, like I didn't really belong, and it stung. Shortly after my 18th birthday, things almost completely fell apart. I felt Mark resented my needing to leave the house. Even though I worked part-time to save money, he repeatedly told me that it would jeopardize my academic progress. Then one evening, I came home to find my room trashed. Derek had thrown a party while Mom and Mark were out, and my room had taken the brunt of it. A broken lamp, beer stains on my research papers. It was a blatant violation of my privacy. I confronted them at breakfast the next morning. Mark responded coldly, almost scornfully, "You should have been more careful with your things." My mom just sighed and mumbled something about families working through things and letting go. I was done letting things go. Everything I did those years felt like it was under a microscope, but not in a way that showed concern for my well-being. It felt like they were just waiting for me to mess up so they could blame me. Derek, who had morphed into a professional couch potato, seemed to get away with everything. Even little Finn was showered with so much attention, it was clear who the favorite was. I remember one time when I was working on a huge science project that I was actually interested in. But even working on it at home was nearly impossible. I needed quiet, so I set up a workspace in the corner of the living room. It felt like I was trying to build something delicate in the middle of Times Square. Eventually, I just couldn't take it anymore. Derek would blast loud music. Finn would run around screaming, and Mark would complain about my project taking up too much space or making a mess. I packed everything up and went to a friend's house. Her parents let me work in their quiet dining room. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could focus. That's when I realized how messed up my home life had become. My friend said, "You're always welcome here." It was a simple offer, but it meant the world to me. For me, home was just a place I couldn't wait to leave. Home is supposed to be a safe haven. But every hour away from it helped me breathe a little easier. I started working extra shifts at my job. Of course, Mark didn't like it. He constantly brought up my job as a distraction from school. But I knew why he really didn't like it. I wasn't around as much for him to criticize. As I saved more money, the idea of moving out started to take shape in my head. It wouldn't be easy, but it felt like the only way to reclaim control of my life. I was a bundle of nerves the day I decided to tell them I was leaving. I'd found a small but affordable studio apartment near my campus. From my part-time job, I'd saved enough to cover the first 3 months' rent. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The thought of having my own life and space kept me going. One evening after dinner, I sat Mark and Mom down at the kitchen table, my heart pounding. I tried to keep my voice steady. I looked them in the eye and said, "I'm moving out." The room went silent, and I could feel the tension rising. You could have heard a pin drop. Mark was the first to speak. He chuckled, shook his head, and said, as if I'd just said the most ridiculous thing imaginable, "You think you're ready to live on your own?" His voice was full of disbelief and a hint of mockery. At first, my mom said nothing. She just sat there, staring down at the table. Her expression unreadable. "I am ready," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. The argument started when I said I needed my own space and had enough savings to cover it. Mark launched into a tirade, accusing me of being selfish, ungrateful, and trying to shirk my responsibilities at home. "Finn looks up to you," he continued, trying to guilt me into staying for my little brother's sake. As if that were enough to keep me in a toxic environment. My mom's response was calmer, but no less devastating. She didn't argue with me like Mark. Nor did she try to stop me. She just kept sighing and saying things like, "Family sticks together, and you'll regret it if you leave." But I knew better. This wasn't about family, it was about control. I was staying put, not just because I wanted my own space, but because I needed it for my emotional and mental well-being. I felt like an outsider in my own home. I was tired of being held accountable for things beyond my control and of trying to fit into a family that had made it clear I wasn't really a part of. I spent the next few days packing. Every item I put in a box felt like a step closer to freedom. Even though it wasn't easy, my mom came into my room on the morning I was supposed to leave. I braced myself for another argument, but it never came. Instead, she helped me pack in silence. Our conversation was brief and superficial. She asked if I needed more boxes or offered me some old kitchen utensils. We both seemed to be avoiding the real issues, making small talk to avoid admitting that this was the end of something. Later that day, when I locked the door to my new studio apartment, I experienced a whirlwind of emotions: relief, sadness, excitement, and fear. I was now completely on my own. It felt both liberating and terrifying. The first few nights were the hardest. The apartment seemed overwhelmingly empty and quiet. I even found myself missing the annoying sounds of home: Derek's loud music, Finn running around, and Mark's constant nagging. But as the days turned into weeks, I grew to cherish the silence. For the first time in years, I could actually breathe. I no longer had to tiptoe around the house, worrying about Mark's mood swings, or whether Derek had thrown another party. I could come and go as I pleased, eat when I wanted, and sleep uninterrupted. It felt like I was finally discovering who I was outside of the dysfunction of my family. A new kind of freedom. Life quickly found its rhythm. I balanced work, school, and keeping up my modest apartment. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. My relationship with my mom and Mark improved slightly after I moved out. I kept my distance but saw them occasionally, which made things easier. Then, out of the blue, I got a call from my mom. Her voice was subdued and more tentative than usual. "Mark has been thinking about his will," she said quietly, as if discussing the weather. "He wants to make sure everything is in order." I reacted cautiously, unsure where this was going. After a pause, she said, "He's decided to include Derek and Finn, but not you. Because they're his biological children, he feels it's more logical." There it was. It stung. Even though I hadn't expected much from Mark, seeing it stated so bluntly hurt more than I anticipated. It wasn't about the money, it was about the message, the reminder that, after all these years, I was still not considered a real member of the family. I forced myself to respond neutrally. "I understand, Mom." Maybe sensing my hurt, she quickly tried to soften the blow. "You have to understand, Anya, this is just legal stuff. It doesn't change how we feel about you, right?" Even though I didn't believe her, I let the conversation shift to other topics. But the damage was already done. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, with that familiar sense of not belonging gnawing at me. Part of me wanted to confront Mark, demand an explanation, or simply tell him how deeply it hurt. But another part of me questioned the point. For years, that family hadn't felt like mine, so why should it matter now? I ultimately decided to back off. I reduced my visits, stayed busy with school and work, and spent more time nurturing relationships with people who actually valued me: friends, teachers, and coworkers who appreciated me for who I was, not for what I could contribute or because we once shared a home. These were the people who mattered. The pain from Mark's will and years of feeling like an outsider began to fade. It wasn't an overnight transformation, but the anger subsided, though it would occasionally flare up, especially at family events when I saw Derek and Finn getting all the attention. I started to realize that some things were simply beyond my control. I began building my own family and sense of belonging. A few months later, Mark recovered from his health scare, and their lives returned to normal. Then came the real test. I was invited to a family dinner to celebrate Mark's recovery. I went out of obligation, not desire. The evening was as awkward as I expected. Mark talked about his recovery. Everyone gushed over Finn's latest academic achievements. And Derek bragged about a new job he'd somehow landed. I sat there, relatively silent. and it was painfully obvious that I was the odd one out. But this time, it stung less. I had come to terms with my place in the family. I felt like I didn't belong. But there were folks around me who liked me for who I am. Not just because we're family or share genes. I made an excuse about an early start and left after dinner. As I drove home, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I'm okay, I told myself. Really okay. I had processed the emotional fallout, faced the reality of my situation, and emerged stronger and more confident than ever. For the first time in years, I felt at peace. But life had another surprise in store. Just when I thought I'd finally achieved some calm and stability, everything turned upside down again. One afternoon, I got a call from a lawyer I'd never heard of. His tone was polite and professional, but there was a hint of apology in his voice. "Am I speaking with Anya Petrova?" he asked. "Yes, that's me," I replied, confused. "I'm calling regarding your great-aunt, Ilara Petrova, and her estate," he explained. His voice slow and measured. "She passed away recently and named you as the sole beneficiary." For a moment, I was speechless. I barely remembered Aunt Ilara. She was one of those distant relatives you heard about but never actually knew. She never had children, and I vaguely remembered my dad mentioning her once or twice as someone who had helped raise him. I hadn't seen her in years. Maybe not since I was a little kid. And now I was being told she'd left everything to me? "I'm sorry for your loss," the lawyer said, breaking the silence. She was a remarkable woman. Still trying to process his words, I blurted out a thank you. Then, half expecting it to be something simple, like an old house or some family heirlooms, I asked, "Exactly what did she leave behind?" "Your great-aunt was quite well off," he said. "Over the years, she made some very savvy investments. The estate includes several properties, a substantial stock portfolio, and a trust fund worth approximately $4 million. My heart skipped a beat. I sat there, gripping my phone, thinking, why me? We weren't close. When I was little, I used to pay her a few visits. But our relationship was never genuinely strong. My mind couldn't quite grasp it. The attorney then stated, "She left a letter for you. I will forward it to you along with the other documents." He added that she went into more detail regarding her decision in the letter. After we hung up, I sat staring at my phone, trying to make sense of everything. Why had Aunt Ilara chosen me to inherit everything? I barely knew her. Was this some kind of mistake? The next few days were spent meeting with the attorney, signing paperwork, and finding out exactly what I'd inherited. There were houses, stocks, and personal belongings, in addition to the money. But it was Aunt Ilara's letter that really affected me. In it, she wrote that she had always admired my independence and saw in me a reflection of herself at my age. She described me as determined, self-sufficient, and capable of building a life on my own, qualities she felt she lacked when she was younger. She wanted to give me the opportunity to use her wealth to create something meaningful. It was overwhelming. Here was this relative I barely knew, who saw something in me that my own family hadn't noticed. She valued and chose me. My first move was to buy a small house. It wasn't extravagant, but it was mine and represented a new chapter in my life. Thinking about long-term financial security, I also bought a rental property and invested the remaining money. I spoke with a financial advisor to make sure I was making sound decisions. It felt surreal. In the span of a week, my life had completely transformed. I no longer had to scrape by or worry about how I would make ends meet. For the first time, I felt truly secure and free. But freedom brought a new set of challenges. At first, I didn't tell anyone about the inheritance, not even my family. Given our history, I knew the news wouldn't be well received. But secrets have a way of getting out, and mine was no exception. It started with a cousin I hadn't seen in years, who found out about the inheritance through legal records. My mom found out before I did, and the rest of the family soon followed. The phone calls started almost immediately. First, my mom called. Her voice unusually cheerful and inquisitive. She gave me compliments, then casually mentioned how difficult things had been financially for her and Mark. I could see where the conversation was going, and sure enough, the floodgates opened. Mark called first, then Derek, and then some distant cousins I hadn't heard from in years. Each implied, in their own way, that they needed a piece of my inheritance. Times are tough, they'd say. My mom even mentioned, "You know how bad Mark's health has been." As if that explained their newfound interest in me. They all seemed to have forgotten about me, except as a potential ATM. I was bombarded with requests for money, loans, and gifts. It felt like vultures were circling, waiting for their chance to swoop in. For a brief moment, I considered giving in, wondering if holding on to the inheritance was selfish. But then I remembered all the years I'd spent feeling like an outsider in my own family, being blamed, dismissed, and ignored. I had worked hard to earn everything I had before this windfall. I had gotten myself through college without their help, and now that I had some stability, they wanted to take it away. When I was struggling, none of them had offered to help. When my mom finally asked why I hadn't told her about the inheritance sooner, I found the strength to resist the guilt and manipulation. I explained to her softly but firmly that our separation was both emotional and physical. I had been shut out, ignored, and alienated for years, as if I had no place in the family. This inheritance gave me the freedom to live on my own without relying on anyone else. It's my life, I assured her, and I have to live it on my own terms. I'm sorry if that upsets you, but right now, I have to do what's best for me. The aftermath of that conversation was worse than I could have imagined. Mom accused me of being arrogant and ungrateful. Mark chimed in, lecturing me about how families should treat each other. Nevertheless, I stood my ground. Over time, the calls became less frequent, and the requests for money stopped when they realized I wouldn't give in. It was difficult, but absolutely necessary. I had learned a hard truth about family. Sometimes, the people you're supposed to trust the most are the ones who let you down. Knowing I had protected myself brought me peace. Finally, I decided not to let them control my life. This inheritance was about taking charge of my own destiny and, more importantly, gaining the ability to live my life on my own terms. My communication with them became strained, but I'd grown used to it. Their approval was no longer necessary, and I wasn't obligated to give them anything. I had friends, mentors, and people who truly cared about me. Not because of family obligations, but because of who I was. The biggest surprise came from an unexpected source, my younger half-brother, Finn. I received an awkward, handwritten note from him. "I'm sorry for asking for money. I miss you," he wrote in his childish handwriting. Though small, this gesture meant a lot. Finn, barely 14, was reaching out in his own way. After that, we started texting. having small conversations about his school and his interests. Nothing too deep. But it was something. It was the beginning of a fragile connection between us. Even though I wasn't optimistic about reconciling with the rest of the family, I was building a life for myself, free of dependence on anyone else. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. But the sense of peace was short-lived. Just when I thought things had settled down, my mom contacted me again, a few weeks after Finn's letter. This time, she said she wanted to talk things over. I could tell this wasn't going to be a conversation about reconnecting or finding common ground, so I agreed to meet her in a public place, hoping to keep things civil. We met at a nearby cafe, and the atmosphere was uneasy from the start. She barely asked about my life or how I was doing. Instead, she jumped right into how difficult things had been financially since Mark's health crisis and how Finn's private school tuition was piling up. I sat there listening, feeling like an outsider listening to her list of troubles. It quickly became clear why she had asked to meet. She also added that they were thinking of renovating the house, and that she really needed a vacation to relieve her stress. It was evident that she wasn't there to heal our relationship. She was there for a single reason. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I cut through the tension, saying, "Mom, just get to the point." She looked me in the eye and said without hesitation, "I expect you to write me a check for $1 million. I nearly choked on my coffee. "Excuse me?" I asked, incredulously. She didn't flinch. "It's only fair. Technically, since it came from your dad's side of the family, all that money should have been mine." I was dumbfounded. Her entitlement and audacity were astounding. She sat there casually demanding $1 million, as if it were her birthright. I said flatly, trying to keep my voice steady, "I'm not giving you $1 million. Her tone shifted from entitled to plain angry, and her expression hardened. "You've always been ungrateful for everything we've done for you," she snapped. Her words painted me as a villain for not handing over money she claimed she was owed. Without another word, I paid the bill and left the cafe. I'm still shocked that my mom thought she could guilt-trip me into giving her money. She had no claim to. And what followed was even worse. A few days later, my mom started spreading rumors. She told everyone who would listen that I had stolen the inheritance, claiming it was rightfully hers, and accused me of hoarding it out of greed. Suddenly, relatives I hadn't heard from in years began calling, either to support her or to pressure me into sharing the money. The hypocrisy was staggering, especially given that Mark had excluded me from his own will because I wasn't family. Even Mark got involved, sending me a long, guilt-ridden text about how I needed to think about the family and make more inclusive decisions. I responded in a single sentence, "You didn't include me in your will. Because I'm not family, remember?" That shut him up for a while. But the drama didn't end there. Things escalated when I received an official-looking letter in the mail. To my astonishment, my mom was suing me. Yes, you read that correctly, she was suing me for a share of the inheritance, claiming that, as my dad's widow, she was entitled to a large portion of the money. I was stunned. Was my own mom really dragging me to court? At first, I was scared, anticipating a long and expensive legal battle. I called my lawyer, who laughed after reading the letter. "This is a joke," he said, tossing the letter aside. "The will is airtight." He then investigated the so-called lawyer who had sent the letter. The phone number was disconnected, and the address on the letterhead was for a dilapidated building under construction. It became clear that my mom and Mark had hired a shady, almost certainly fraudulent, lawyer in a last-ditch effort to scare me into giving them money. While I was relieved that the lawsuit was baseless, I was also deeply saddened. Their willingness to go to such lengths for my inheritance was shocking. They had tried guilt-tripping and manipulation, and now they were making direct legal threats. I was done trying to salvage any kind of relationship with them. I knew I needed space. After the legal scare subsided, the emotional toll hit me hard. I was exhausted, sleep-deprived, and the constant drama was taking a toll on my mental health. That's when I realized I needed a break from everything. We decided to go on a road trip after talking with some of our friends. Nothing extravagant, just a visit to a couple spots we'd always wanted to go, but never got around to. It was just what I needed, time to clear my head, escape the chaos, and, most importantly, consider what I wanted for my future. As we started driving, I couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed in such a short time. A year ago, I was barely scraping by in a house that never felt like home. Now, I had financial security, my own home, and the freedom to make my own decisions without interference from others. It felt liberating, but also bittersweet. Growing up, I had looked to my mom and stepdad for guidance and support. To me, family meant having someone who would always have your back, no matter what. But through it all, I learned a difficult lesson: just because someone is related by blood doesn't guarantee they'll be there for you in the ways that truly matter. Throughout the trip, I thought a lot and realized that I didn't need their money, their validation, or their acceptance. I already had everything I needed. And the relationships I actually valued were the ones I had formed with people who loved me for who I was, not what I could offer them. In small ways, my friends, colleagues, and even Finn expressed more genuine care for me than my mom or Mark ever did. Following the trip, I decided to write letters to each family member who had tried to manipulate me. I did it for myself, not for them. It was my way of achieving closure, expressing what I couldn't say in the heat of the moment. In those letters, I detailed how their actions had hurt me and how, despite my desire to be a part of the family, I was constantly pushed aside. I wished them well and hoped they would move on, just as I had. The only reaction I received came from Finn. His note was small but sincere. "I appreciate you sending the letter. I miss you. Let's hang out sometime," it read. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Maybe, one day, Finn and I could develop a genuine relationship that's not based on any obligations or manipulation. As for the rest of the family, I had finally accepted that we were better off at a distance. The inheritance had been a wake-up call. Not just a financial windfall, but a revelation about my true family. It wasn't the people who raised me, it was the people who supported me when I had nothing to offer but myself. Looking back, I don't have any regrets. I stood my ground, protected my future, and found peace by letting go of the toxic relationships that had been holding me back. Life has a strange way of teaching us what's truly important, and I'm grateful for that, no matter how painful the lessons. Sitting in my own home, surrounded by people who feel more like family than my actual relatives ever did, I know I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. I should never have been born. Rejected by my parents, abandoned My aunt and uncle said they would become my family. But surely, they too would abandon me. That's what I thought. The pain was so intense that I couldn't even cry. But after 10 years, incredibly happy days awaited me. My name is Hillary. I was a beginner at dance, but I joined a mom's dance school. And am now experiencing my youth-like club activities at 40. No matter the age, life can be enjoyable. Now, I live every day to the fullest. But as a child, I was frail and far from a youthful life. It was when I was 10 years old. I had a high fever for days, and despite visiting the hospital, the cause remained unknown. After I was sent to one hospital after another, I was finally diagnosed with systemic lupus erythematosus at a hospital I reached at last. I would get fevers easily, and the steroids I took as medication caused my face to get round. And I even lost hair due to the symptoms of the disease. Even when my condition stabilized, I frequently ended up staying in bed and tired easily. So I couldn't stay up late or play until I was completely exhausted like other kids. Soon, my mother also said, "Since you get fevers easily, you're not allowed to play with friends." Gradually, I gained weight from staying inside. I wasn't fun to be around, probably for my friends. I had fewer playmates. Even my parents, while drinking at night, would complain. She frequently has fevers, and although her medical expenses are subsidized by the government, the taxi fare for her hospital visits adds up. Why did we ever have such a child? I didn't choose to have this disease. Don't say whatever you like without understanding the feelings of someone who has to live with an incurable disease. Even though I harbored hatred toward my parents, I desperately wanted to be loved like I was before I got sick. During all this, the one who always stayed by my side was my sister, Megan, 2 years my senior. By the age of 12, she already had what one might call a perfect appearance, a so-called beautiful girl. When I went to the shopping district with my sister, people would often give us extra items, saying, "Since the young lady is so cute, here's a little extra, on top of our orders." Big, round eyes and straight hair without any peculiarities. Perhaps it was a skip-generation trait from our quarter-blood grandmother. But she had a small face and slim limbs unlike our parents, and looked more like a model. Anyone would adore such a beautiful sister, and our parents did indeed love her very much. Whenever we went out, my mother always held my sister's hand. And it was often just my sister whom my parents would take out. I have no memory of being held by the hand, and was often left behind. Still, before I fell ill, I think they loved us a bit more equally. But after I became sick, it's embarrassing to walk around with you looking so round-faced. As if I can't manage my child's weight, my mother began to refuse to go out with me. My father also said, "Because you and Megan look so different." The neighbors gossiped that mother might have cheated. Let's stop going out as a family, and I became the black sheep. As my parents openly favored only my sister and treated me as something unwanted, their behavior escalated day by day. "You're not going out anyway, so it's fine." And I received no allowance, nor did they buy me many clothes. Even on my birthday, they'd say, "We don't find your birth something to celebrate, so no celebration." Meanwhile, my sister would be taken to restaurants just for scoring well on tests, and would get the shoes she wanted. Yet, my sister grew up kind, without becoming arrogant. She would subtly find out what I wanted, pretend it was what she wanted, and then have our parents buy it to give it to me as a gift. Whenever she went out with our parents, she would always say, It would be nice if Hillary could come too. Though she would be persuaded by our parents saying, it would be pitiful if she got sick from going out. My sister would complain to me. Why are mom and dad only cold to Hillary? We are both their children after all. It seemed like my sister never quite understood why I wasn't loved as much. Although others praised my sister's beauty, she herself was not aware of it. She didn't think it was a reason to compare herself with me. What's important to people is not looks but the heart, and that's much more important. My sister would say, surprisingly mature for a child. Odd to say as her sister. But truly, she didn't seem like our parents' child at all. As I reached adolescence, my condition worsened due to hormonal imbalances. And I gained even more weight, despite dietary restrictions. Looking back, it must have been swelling from the medication. Adults, my parents, should have sensed such things, but they had no such sensibilities. They would only blame me, saying, "Don't walk beside me." Or "It's embarrassing even to have you enter the house. Why can't you manage yourself?" There was not a hint of a supportive attitude. Until now, my sister, who had been worried about my illness, used to go to school with me. But even that was banned by our parents. Having someone like you walk beside Megan lowers her reputation, they said. My sister protested vehemently, but our home was in a strange place at that time. And what our parents said was final. No matter how old we got and capable of reasoning, our arguments never prevailed. We were bombarded with harsh words and had to follow our parents' wishes. By this time, it wasn't just that they adored my sister, simply put, I was an eyesore. They wanted nothing more than to stop any interaction between me and my sister. It's laughable how much I wasn't treated like family. Gradually, my sister was reproached by our parents for talking to me. And I also felt guilty and refrained from speaking to her. My sister would say not to worry about it, but back then, I wasn't strong enough to just say, "Then I won't care." Gradually, a gap formed between me and my sister. Just as our parents wanted. Sisters, yet we hardly spoke, and though we lived in the same house, our relationship became like that of strangers. Gradually, my parents spoke to me only minimally. And I was ordered to eat my meals alone in my room. They seemed determined to exclude me completely from the family. One day, when I returned from school, no one was at home. There was just a note on the table stating that the family was going on a trip. I knew it. But it seemed I was not part of the family. I had been left behind. Eat this, it probably meant, referring to the fridge full of cold bread. Having been treated roughly all this time, it was pathetic that I thought it kind to leave food. Even if it was just white rice. Eventually, they didn't return for about a week. And naturally, the white rice ran out, and without any allowance. I barely made it through the last few days on school lunches alone. Such harsh treatment became the norm, and several years passed. Then one day when I turned 15, my parents suddenly woke me in the middle of the night and ordered me to get in the car, almost shouting. Confused and still in my pajamas, I got into the car. And my parents headed to my maternal uncle's house. Why such a time to visit my uncles? My sleepy brain worked overtime. But I couldn't figure it out. My uncle and his wife, who had been rung up repeatedly by my parents late at night, appeared at the front door with very displeased expressions. "What's up, at this hour?" my uncle, pressing his temples, apparently hard to wake. My aunt, not wanting to be seen in her pajamas, covered herself with a robe and tidied her tousled bangs. "I've got a favor to ask you too." I came up with a great idea. They say, strike while the iron is hot, so I rushed over. My mother laughed gleefully. My uncle and his wife seemed very troubled by her demeanor. I want you to take this child. Or rather, take her. Saying that, my mother thumped my back and pushed me in front of my uncle and aunt. My father also gently explained to me, from now on, your uncle and aunt will be your new family. I didn't understand. The face of my mother, genuinely delighted to be rid of me. And the kind expression of my father, visible only now, looked like monsters to me. Naturally, my uncle and aunt were baffled. Noticing the commotion, my cousin Karen also came down from her room on the second floor in her pajamas. This child often becomes bedridden and looks bad. And she's become an embarrassment to our family. She'll be a high school student next year, right? It will cost more than ever. And we don't want to spend money on a child with no future. At my mother's words, my father nodded in agreement. We think we've raised her well until now. We're just tired. So think of it as helping people and take this child. My mother laughed, saying, isn't that okay? Does she not realize how harsh she is being? Or does she not care because it's me? I knew it, so I no longer feel sad. I've become numb. Yet, I wonder why I was born into such a family. No, should I even be alive? Feeling utterly negated, I couldn't help but mutter, I should never have been born. At that moment, my aunt raised her voice, that's not true at all. She herself seemed surprised by her loud outburst and covered her mouth with her hand. However, my uncle continued. Exactly, there's no such thing as someone who shouldn't have been born. My cousin stepped between them and came over to me, taking my hand. Since Auntie says it's okay. Hillary, come to our house. Let's be a family. At my cousin's words, I didn't know how to respond. Even though I knew I wasn't loved, they were still my only parents. Part of me wanted to stay with them. Watching this scene, I hoped they would say, actually, come back to us. But my parents just smiled happily, saying, that's great. Being unloved by my parents, going to my aunt and uncle's house. I was sure to be a burden there too. Though their words were kind, it must have been inconvenient for my aunt and uncle as well. As the discussion to take me in progressed, I thought to myself, it's just a change of place where I'll suffer. I don't care anymore. 10 years have passed since then. Ever since being taken in by my aunt and uncle's family, I've lived every day on edge, fearing when they might start to dislike me. Always trying to be a good child. But even after 10 years, I was never disliked or treated as an outsider in their home. When it came to university entrance exams, I said, I don't want to be a burden. So I'll work and leave this house. My uncle scolded me, crying. It's the worst thing for a child to feel they need to be considerate towards adults. All this time, I had built a wall between myself and my aunt and uncle, thinking I would eventually be abandoned. But my uncle, too, was struggling, not knowing how to make me open up to him. My aunt also cried, and I felt ashamed for ignoring their kindness. I can trust these people. After understanding each other's true feelings, I finally became the child of my aunt and uncle. I started calling them Mom and Dad. And although my cousin was the same age, I couldn't think of her as a sister. But she was both a friend and a cousin, and closer to me than anyone else. Compared to my parents, who were bankers, my aunt and uncle's standard of living was lower. But they still celebrated my birthday with my aunt's homemade cooking, and gave me allowance just like my cousin. We rarely went on family vacations. But we always went shopping together on weekends. Once a month, we had a barbecue party. It was a lot of fun. 10 years passed by in a flash, and I feel they were much brighter than the 14 years I spent with my parents. At the 10-year mark, I took action. I contacted my sister, who I hadn't seen in a decade. It seems she had never been told where I was. Given that our parents wanted to keep us apart, I had expected as much. She had been told a blatant lie that I had run away from home, and that a police report was filed. Originally, my parents were somewhat estranged from my aunt and uncle. My mother, who had always been selfish since childhood, was disliked by my uncle. My mother didn't like my uncle much either. Thinking back, the last time my sisters and cousin Karen met was around when we were 5 years old. With such a relationship between their parents, my sister had no idea I was living at my aunt and uncle's house. When I finally met my sister, she had become emaciated, losing the radiance she had when she was known as a beauty. However, her kindness was unchanged as she hugged me and said, "I've missed you." I had been thinking about my sister all this time, so naturally, tears flowed. I learned that after we were separated, my sister had suffered from excessive interference from our parents. When scouted in the city, she was reluctantly pushed into the entertainment industry by our parents' wishes. Though it was just some minor modeling in magazines, it wasn't a long-lasting job, and no matter how cute my sister was, there were always better ones. It's not a world where one can get by on cuteness alone. And there wasn't much demand for my sister in the modeling world. Yet, our parents refused to let her go to university, insisting, "Focus on your entertainment career." They believed she would definitely become successful, a big star. People who thought my sister's fame was their own didn't want to miss the chance for her to become a celebrity. However, she never became popular, and there were times when she had no work for a year. Then, my sister was considered a freeloader. She thought about saving money to go to school, but again, our parents strongly opposed it. They even locked her up in the house until she reflected on her actions. As our parents' interference escalated, my sister seemed to have developed mental health issues. She might not be aware of it, but she gradually became unable to make proper decisions, accepting the situation as inevitable. Now, she follows our parents' orders, caring for our mother, who started limping after breaking her leg a few years ago. That's wrong. Why does your life have to be controlled by Dad and Mom? My sister silently listened to my anger with her eyes downcast. Deep down, she must know this lifestyle is wrong. Just a little more. You say you can't start over in your late 20s, but you can still start over. Let's work hard together. Do you intend to let Dad and Mom consume your life forever? While holding my sister's hand, I desperately pleaded with her. After about 2 hours of earnest conversation, finally, my sister said, "You're right, Hillary. How did it come to this?" And she cried. "It's okay, you can start over. I'll help you," I reassured her, holding her in my arms as she sobbed uncontrollably. We parted that day. A month later, I visited our familiar old home. When I rang the doorbell, my mother appeared with a face as if she saw something filthy and yelled, "What are you doing here?" "I've come to pick up my sister." "What?" "Get out of here quickly. We've declared that you ran away from home." "I know. I heard it from my sister." "What?" My mother, unaware of my sister and my reunion, looked at me as if I was insane. From behind her, my sister appeared with a suitcase in hand and said, "Sorry to keep you waiting." My mother, shocked, exclaimed, "Megan, where are you going with that luggage?" "I've decided to live with Hillary." "What?" My mother's face looked like a deer caught in headlights. I almost laughed. "Mom, your knee isn't that bad, right? I saw you walking briskly to the fridge to get some ice the other day." My sister's words made my mother turn pale and stare blankly. Had she not expected my sister to counter, or had she never imagined that her lie about her knee was known? It might be both. My sister used to argue with our parents often when she was younger, but that had diminished over the years. My father also appeared from the back, looking confused. "I appreciate that you raised us, but I can no longer live being controlled by you. I want to live my own life. From today, I'm cutting ties with you and Dad." "What?" My father, also surprised by my sister's words, started scolding her. "After all we've done for you, why? You say you've treated her well. Maybe from your perspective. But your behavior towards her has been overly intrusive." My father glared at me, displeased by my remark. "Just because you weren't favored, you call it intrusion? It's normal parental affection. Then why didn't you let her go to university? Why did you dismiss her opinions and twist her way of living? She's not a child anymore, she's 27 years old. You've interfered too much." My sister spoke in a quiet yet firm tone. "I've been struggling all along." My father started to retort to me, but hearing my sister's words, he closed his mouth. "You can't argue back, can you? Because you've always treated her as it suited you. Parents like that deserve to be abandoned by their children." "We didn't really." "That's right, since Megan complied with our requests." "Don't make it sound like we're the only bad ones," my mother protested. Both insisted they weren't to blame, but it was clear they were. "Just keep saying we're not to blame all your life. No matter what you say, I'm taking my sister with me. Don't take our precious Megan away." "You're really the worst daughter," my mother yelled. I glared back at her in anger. "If she's so precious, then act like it. If I'm the worst daughter, then you're the worst parents who don't even try to understand their children." Perhaps because they believe they're not at fault, my words didn't reach them. They looked dumbfounded and said things like, "We've taken good care of you too," which of course I ignored. "Let's go, Megan." Saying that, I took my sister's hand. My aunt and uncle, along with my cousin, had already stepped out of the car they parked nearby to welcome us. Seeing my uncle, my mother said displeasedly, "Why are you here?" It's strange to say taking in since both are already adults. But it's hard to watch sisters living apart. We're thinking of Megan as our daughter from now on and intend to keep it that way. "What?" "Megan and Hillary will be part of our family from now on. Please, resolve any issues you have between yourselves as a couple," my aunt added. My parents looked even more confused. "You look like you don't understand. Basically, everyone here is cutting ties with you. So don't rely on us no matter what troubles you face as you get older," I clarified. My parents froze. "What?" "Goodbye, Mommy, Dad," my sister said without looking back and got into my uncle's car. I stuck out my tongue and said cheerily, "Well, take care." My aunt and uncle bowed slightly. And my cousin added, "Reflect on your actions," before we all left. My parents just stared blankly as we got into the car, unable to say anything. Days later, my parents appeared repeatedly at my uncle's house, begging, "We're sorry, please let Megan come back." But it was too late. By that time, my sister and I had already moved out to live together, away from our parents. I had continued to live with my uncle, but to pull my sister away from our parents, we rented a new place. This was also my uncle's idea, thinking it better for my sister's mental health for us to live just the two of us. I agreed. Initially, my uncle ignored their visits, but, exasperated by their persistence, he eventually exploded, "You're apologizing, yet you only want Megan back? That's why you're abandoned by both. You've reaped what you sowed," and drove them away. Finally, understanding the gravity of their actions, my parents wept. But hearing that didn't move my sister and me at all. Cried? More like, "Oh, really?" That was about the extent of our reaction. After all, my sister and I had endured much worse pain. In fact, we even wished they would suffer more. Subsequently, my parents blamed each other for the estrangement with their children, which led to their eventual divorce. After retiring, my father lived alone in that same house but faced trouble with the neighbors over garbage disposal issues, and even experienced vandalism at his home. Despite being at fault, he never apologized and maintained an arrogant demeanor, which made him unpopular and considered a troublesome old man by the neighbors. After the divorce, my mother, having split the assets with my father, should have been able to live decently if she hadn't indulged in luxuries. However, she was duped by someone she met through my sister, with a too-good-to-be-true offer to debut her as an ageless beauty model in the entertainment industry. She was lured into making investments to beautify herself, which included paying for walking lessons and expensive serums, leading to the loss of an enormous amount of money. Indeed, this was a scam. Realistically, a woman well past her prime, and nowhere near the ageless beauty model ideal, flaunting her opulence with a noticeably large belly, had no chance in the entertainment industry. Her failure to realize this likely stemmed from basking in the praises directed at her beautiful daughter, mistakenly treating them as if they were meant for her. She should have faced reality sooner. As a result, she ended up heavily in debt, with no job due to her bad knee, living in dire straits. Reliant on a divorced and single friend, she managed to stay at their place, but was kicked out once that friend remarried. Despite these hardships, she still clung to the hope that if only Megan would return. If only I had Megan. Revealing her inability to accept reality. Her current situation remains unclear. Best case scenario, she might be working part-time, but it's unlikely she will ever return to the lifestyle she once enjoyed with my father, given her fondness for luxury. She is likely living a life marked by poverty and loneliness. As for us, my sister overcame her psychological issues and regained her beauty. She had resigned herself to single life due to not having a family dream, but recently, she's had a boyfriend. Perhaps soon, there'll be happy news. My cousin married, had children, and is now a mother of 3. And me? I had avoided marriage and children due to my condition potentially worsening with pregnancy. However, I ended up marrying a former coworker who understood everything and said, "I don't need children. I just want to be with you." Despite initially rejecting his proposals because I might not be able to have children, he insisted, liking me for reasons even he couldn't fathom, saying, "I just feel really comfortable with you." Maybe it's good compatibility. He, too, had suffered from mental issues due to his parents' divorce. People get sick as they age, and having a disease or two doesn't change who you are. He reassured me. Even though we were dating with the intention of marrying, I hesitated to make the final decision. Despite being very careful, I unexpectedly became pregnant during our relationship. From there, the marriage discussions moved quickly. Looking back, I think perhaps the child gave me the push I needed to commit, at a time when I lacked the courage. It must have been fate. Now, married, I live a modest but happy life surrounded by a kind, gentle husband and a lovely daughter. My health worsened temporarily after childbirth, but thanks to new medications, it's now stable and I lead a normal life, even enjoying dancing with other moms in a dance circle. Though I tire more easily than others, the casual nature of the circle allows me to participate freely. Whether due to medication changes or reduced life stress, my once chubby appearance has slimmed down, though I'm a bit bothered by some remaining cellulite. My life is still very much ahead of me. I never thought I'd be sharing this, but here we are. I'm Clara, 28, and 4 years ago, my world was turned upside down because of a false accusation from my older sister, Olivia, who's 31. I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania with my parents, Robert, 58M, and Susan, 56F, and Olivia. We lived in a comfortable two-story house that my parents bought right after they got married. It wasn't extravagant, but it was our home. My dad was a high school history teacher, and my mom worked as a librarian at the local library. They weren't rich, but they always ensured we had what we needed. Growing up, Olivia and I were incredibly close. We'd spend countless hours in our backyard, building forts, playing pretend, and just being kids. She was always the imaginative one, coming up with elaborate stories and scenarios, and I was happy to be her sidekick. As we got older, though, things started to shift. Olivia was always a high achiever. She excelled in school, was president of the student council, and seemed to effortlessly succeed at everything she put her mind to. I, on the other hand, was more relaxed. I did all right in school, but I wasn't driven like Olivia. As we entered our teens, this difference started to create a rift between us. By the time Olivia went off to college, we had drifted apart. She got into a prestigious university with a full scholarship, while I stayed local and enrolled in community college. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life, so I took a variety of courses, trying to find my path. After graduating, Olivia moved to Philadelphia and landed a job at a major tech company. She'd come home for holidays and the occasional weekend, filled with stories of her exciting city life and impressive career. I couldn't help but feel a little inadequate in comparison. I was still living at home, working part-time at the local bookstore, and still figuring out my next move. Despite our diverging paths, I always believed Olivia and I were okay. We weren't as close as we used to be, but I chalked it up to growing up and having different lives. I had no idea how drastically things were about to change. 4 years ago, Olivia got engaged to her boyfriend, David, 33M. They'd been together for 3 years, and everyone was thrilled. David was an architect from a well-off family, and my parents adored him. He proposed with a beautiful antique diamond ring that had been in his family for generations. Olivia was over the moon and couldn't stop showing it off. The engagement party was a huge affair. My parents invited what felt like the entire town to our house to celebrate. I remember feeling a bit out of place amidst the sophisticated city friends Olivia and David had invited. I stuck close to my childhood friends who were still in town, feeling more comfortable with them than with Olivia's polished crowd. A month after the engagement, everything fell apart. It was a Wednesday afternoon, and I had a day off from the bookstore. I was upstairs in my room, reading, enjoying the peacefulness of the house. Olivia was visiting for a week, taking some time off work to start planning the wedding with our mom. I heard Olivia come home from lunch with Mom. They were chatting and laughing downstairs. I didn't pay much attention and went back to my book. About an hour later, I heard Olivia scream. I rushed downstairs to see what was happening, and she immediately accused me of stealing her engagement ring. She said she'd taken it off while washing her hands and left it on the kitchen counter. When she went back to get it, it was gone. I was shocked and immediately denied taking it. But Olivia wouldn't listen. She kept yelling that I was the only other person in the house, so it had to be me. She started saying how I was always jealous of her success, and how I probably wanted to pawn the ring so I could finally move out. Our parents came home in the middle of the chaos, and Olivia told them her version of events. To my horror, they believed her without question. My mom started crying, asking how I could do something like that to my own sister. My dad just looked at me, his eyes filled with disappointment. They started searching my room, tearing everything apart. They didn't find the ring, but they did find some cash I'd been saving from my bookstore job. It wasn't much, maybe a couple $100, but Olivia immediately seized on it, claiming I must have sold the ring and that's where the money came from. I tried to explain that I'd been saving for months, planning to maybe take some photography classes, but no one listened. The next few days were a nightmare. My parents and Olivia kept pressuring me to confess and return the ring. They threatened to call the police if I didn't come clean. I was terrified and felt completely alone. No one in my family believed me, and I was being treated like a criminal in my own home. I tried reaching out to some of my friends, but most of them had moved away after high school. The few who remained in town seemed hesitant to get involved in family drama. I felt more isolated than ever. After a week of relentless accusations and threats, my parents made a decision that would change my life forever. They told me I had to leave. They said they couldn't trust me anymore, and that I was bringing shame to the family. They gave me 2 days to pack my things and get out. I was devastated. I had nowhere to go and no idea what to do. My best friend from high school, Emily, 28F, who had recently moved back to town after finishing her degree, offered to let me crash on her couch for a while. But I knew I couldn't stay there permanently. Her apartment was tiny, and she was just starting her career as a teacher. I packed everything I could into a backpack and an old suitcase's clothes, books, my laptop, and a few treasured keepsakes. As I was leaving, I saw Olivia watching me from her bedroom window. I thought I saw a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes, but she quickly looked away. Walking out of that house, the only home I'd ever known, was the hardest thing I've ever done. I felt betrayed and abandoned by the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. The worst part was, I hadn't done anything wrong. For the next few months, I bounced between Emily's couch and cheap motels, when I could afford them. I took on any odd jobs I could find to make ends meet. I worked as a waitress, a dog walker, and even spent a few weeks cleaning offices. It was tough, but I was determined to prove my innocence and make it on my own. Eventually, I landed a steady job at a local coffee shop. The hours were long. And the pay wasn't great, but it was consistent. It allowed me to rent a small room in a shared house with a few other young people. Slowly, I started to rebuild my life, but the pain of what had happened never truly went away. I'd lie awake at night, replaying the events in my head, wondering how things had gone so wrong. How could my family have turned on me so quickly? How could Olivia, who had grown up with me and knew me better than anyone, believe I was capable of such a thing? I cut off all contact with my family. They tried to reach out a few times in the beginning. My mom would leave tearful voicemails, begging me to come home and make things right. My dad sent a few terse text messages, saying we needed to talk. Olivia even showed up at the coffee shop once, but I refused to see her. I couldn't bear to face them after what they'd done. They weren't my family anymore. For 4 years, this was my life. I made new friends at work and in my shared house. We'd hang out after shifts, grab drinks, and watch movies. It wasn't the life I had imagined for myself, but it was mine, and I had built it from nothing. I worked hard and even got promoted to shift supervisor at the coffee shop. I started taking online courses in graphic design, something I'd always been interested in. I was slowly figuring out what I wanted to do with my life. But there was always a part of me that was angry and hurt by what had happened. I missed my old life, my family, but I couldn't forgive them for not believing me. Every holiday season was difficult. Seeing families together, hearing Christmas carols. It all brought a wave of sadness for what I had lost. Then, last week, I received an unexpected email from my dad. The subject line simply read, "We need to talk." The message was short, saying they needed to see me urgently. And that it was about the ring. At first, I was tempted to delete it, like I had done with all their previous attempts to contact me. But something made me hesitate. Maybe it was curiosity. Or maybe a small part of me still longed for closure. After agonizing over it for hours, I decided to hear them out. I called my dad, and what he told me left me stunned. The ring had been found. Olivia had accidentally dropped it down the kitchen sink while washing her hands. She'd only realized it a few days ago, when the faucet started making strange noises, and they called a plumber to investigate. My dad said Olivia was devastated when she realized what had happened, and that I'd been telling the truth all along. He said they all felt terrible about what they'd done to me and wanted to make things right. I hung up the phone, feeling a whirlwind of emotions. On the one hand, I felt vindicated. I had been telling the truth all along, and now everyone knew it. But on the other hand, I was furious. I was angry that it had taken 4 years for the truth to come out. That I had lost so much time with my family. And that I had struggled alone for so long when I had done nothing wrong. Now I'm at a crossroads. My family wants me to come home. They say they want to make amends. Olivia has been calling and texting nonstop, begging for forgiveness. But I'm not sure I can forgive them. They cast me out without a second thought, chose to believe the worst of me, and left me to fend for myself for 4 years. Part of me wants to tell them all to go to hell, and let them live with the shame of what they did to me. But another part of me misses my old life and wonders if there's a way to rebuild what we've lost. I don't know what to do. Should I give them a chance to make things right? Or should I continue living the life I've built for myself, without them? I'm torn and could really use some outside perspective on this whole situation. It's been a week since my last post, and a lot has transpired. I want to thank everyone for their advice and support. It really helped me process my emotions and decide what to do. After much deliberation, I decided to meet with my family. I felt I owed it to myself to confront them and get some closure, even if I wasn't sure about reconciliation. We agreed to meet at a neutral location, a small diner in the next town over. I chose it because it was far enough from our hometown that we wouldn't run into anyone we knew, but close enough for everyone to get to without too much trouble. I was incredibly nervous on the day of the meeting. I hadn't seen my family in 4 years, and I wasn't sure what to expect. I arrived at the diner early and picked a booth in the back where we could have some privacy. When they walked in, it was like a punch to the gut. Seeing them after all this time was intense. My mom burst into tears the second she saw me. She looked older than I remembered, with more lines around her eyes and gray in her hair. My dad looked weary and worn down. His shoulders slumped as if he were carrying a heavy burden. Olivia couldn't meet my gaze at first. She seemed smaller, less confident than the sister I remembered. We sat down, and for a moment, no one knew what to say. Then they all started talking at once, apologies pouring out. My parents said they had failed me as parents by not trusting me and kicking me out. They admitted they had regretted their decision every day since, but pride and shame had kept them from reaching out sooner. My dad, who had always been a man of few words, talked at length about how he had replayed those days in his head, trying to understand how he could have been so blind. He said he had always prided himself on being fair and just, but that his emotions had clouded his judgment when it mattered most. My mom, through tears, told me how she had kept my room exactly as I had left it, hoping that one day I would return. She said she would wake up in the middle of the night, thinking she heard me coming home, only to realize what had happened. Olivia broke down, sobbing, saying she would never forgive herself for accusing me and destroying our relationship. She said how she had always looked up to me when we were kids, even though I was younger. She admitted she had been so wrapped up in her own life and problems that she had lost sight of what was truly important. As they spoke, memories of our childhood came flooding back. I remembered how Olivia had defended me when I was being teased in elementary school. I thought about all the times we had laughed together, shared secrets, and supported each other through tough times. It made the betrayal hurt even more. But it also reminded me of the good times we'd shared. I listened to everything they said, but I couldn't bring myself to forgive them yet. The pain and resentment of the past 4 years were still too raw. I told them I needed time to process everything. They seemed to understand and didn't push for more. My mom asked to hug me before we left, but I flinched away. I wasn't ready for that kind of closeness yet. The hurt look on her face almost made me reconsider, but I stood firm. I needed to protect myself emotionally. After the meeting, I went back to my apartment and thought long and hard about what I wanted. Did I want to go back to my old life? Could I ever trust them again? Was it worth trying to repair our relationship? I realized that while I missed having a family, I had also grown a lot in the past 4 years. I had become independent, resilient, and had built a life for myself from scratch. I wasn't the same person they'd kicked out 4 years ago. I thought about my job at the coffee shop, my online classes, and the friends I'd made. I had worked hard to get where I was, and I was proud of what I had accomplished. On my own. The idea of giving that up and going back to my old life felt daunting. At the same time, I couldn't deny that seeing my family had stirred up a lot of emotions. Despite everything, I still loved them and missed them. I wondered if it was possible to have a relationship with them while still maintaining my independence. After a few days of agonizing, I made a decision. I called my parents and told them that while I appreciated their apologies, I wasn't ready to fully reconcile. I told them I needed more time and space to heal. I also set some boundaries. I said I was willing to have limited contact with them. But I wasn't moving back home or pretending that nothing had happened. I told them that if we were going to have a relationship, it had to be on my terms. They were disappointed but said they understood. They promised to respect my boundaries and give me the time I needed. My mom asked if she could call me once a week to check in, and I agreed, thinking it might be a good way to slowly rebuild trust. As for Olivia, I've decided to keep my distance for now. Her actions had hurt me the most, and I wasn't ready to forgive her yet. I told her I needed more time before I could even consider having a relationship with her again. She was heartbroken but said she understood and would wait until I was ready. It's been a challenging week, with a lot of emotional ups and downs. I've had moments where I question my decision, wondering if I'm being too harsh, or if I'm missing out on a chance to reconnect with my family. But then I remember how quickly they turned on me. And I know I'm doing the right thing by taking things slow. I've also started looking into therapy options. Many of you suggested it in the comments. And I think it would be helpful to have a professional to talk to as I navigate this complex situation. I've never been to therapy before, so I'm a little nervous, but I think it could be good for me. For now, my focus is on my job and my studies. I have a big project coming up at work, and I'm determined not to let all this family drama distract me from my goals. I'm also thinking about moving to a bigger apartment. I've been saving up, and I think I'm ready for a place of my own, without roommates. Thank you again for all your support. It's comforting to know that there are people out there who understand and care, even if we've never met. I'll post another update if anything significant changes. It's been almost a month since my last update, and I wanted to share some developments. I've been sticking to the boundaries I set with my family. We've had a few phone calls and texts, but nothing too intense. It's been okay. Awkward at times, but not as painful as I anticipated. My parents have been mostly respectful of my wishes. They check in every now and then, but they don't demand more than I'm willing to give. I can tell they're trying to rebuild trust, but it's a slow process. My mom calls once a week, as we agreed. Those calls were strained at first, with long silences, but they're getting easier. We mostly talk about neutral topics, like my work at the library, the weather, and my online courses. It's not much, but it's a start. My dad has been sending me short emails, usually just to check in or share something he thinks I'd find interesting. Last week, he forwarded me an article about a new art gallery opening in our hometown. It was a small gesture, but it reminded me of how he used to clip out newspaper articles for me when I was younger. Olivia has been having the hardest time with the boundary I set between us. She sent me several long, emotional texts, apologizing and begging for a chance to make things right. I've responded simply, saying I need more time. It's hard, but I'm standing firm on this. I know she's hurting, but I'm not ready to deal with her emotions on top of my own. The big news is that I've started therapy. I found a counselor who specializes in family trauma. And we've had a few sessions so far. It's been tough to dredge up all the pain from the past. But I think it's helping. My therapist is helping me process my anger and trust issues, and giving me tools for setting healthy boundaries. In our last session, we talked about how the incident with the ring was about more than just the accusation, but also years of feeling like I didn't measure up to Olivia's achievements. It's made me realize that there were problems in our family dynamic long before the ring incident, and that healing will involve addressing those issues as well. One unexpected outcome of all of this is that I've gotten closer to my friends, especially Emily. They've been incredibly supportive throughout this whole ordeal. Emily even offered to come with me to any future family meetings for moral support. It's taught me that family isn't just about blood, it's about the people who stand by you when things get tough. Work has been a welcome distraction. I've been pouring myself into my job, and even got a small promotion. I'm now in charge of training new hires, which means more responsibility and a slight pay raise. It's nice to have something positive to focus on. As for my living situation, I've decided to stay put for now. It's not much, but it's mine, and it represents the independence I've worked so hard for. My parents offered to help me find a nicer place, but I declined. I need to do this on my own. However, I have started seriously looking into options for continuing my education. A state university about an hour away offers evening classes. I'm thinking about applying to their graphic design program. It would be a big step, but I think I'm ready for it. Overall, I'm taking things one day at a time. Some days are harder than others. There are moments when I long for the easy connection we used to have as a family. But then I remember how quickly they turned on me, and I know I can't rush this process. My therapist says it's okay to have mixed feelings about everything. She encourages me to be patient with myself and not feel pressured to forgive before I'm ready. We're working on strategies for coping with upcoming family gatherings and holidays, which are making me more anxious than I'd like to admit. For now, my priorities are healing and building a life I can be proud of, with or without my family. It's not easy, but I'm feeling hopeful about the future. I'm learning that it's okay to put myself first, and that setting boundaries doesn't make me a bad person. Thank you for your continued support. Your comments and messages have given me strength throughout this process. It's comforting to know I'm not alone in dealing with family issues like these. It's been 6 months since my original post, so I thought it was time for a final update. A lot has changed in the past few months. The biggest news is that I've decided to move to a new city for a new job opportunity. It's a significant step up in my career, and I'm incredibly excited about the new challenges. The job is with a design firm, and the work is related to my graphic design courses, but with more project management. It's a management role, something I've been working towards for a while. The salary is significantly higher than what I was making before, and it comes with benefits like health insurance and a retirement plan. Before making this decision, I had a long conversation with my therapist. We talked about how this move would impact my healing process and my relationship with my family. Ultimately, we agreed that this could be a really good thing for me, a chance to truly stand on my own 2 feet and define myself outside of the family drama. I told my parents about the move last week. They were surprised and disappointed, but they said they understood. My mom cried a little, saying she had hoped we'd have more time to repair our relationship before I left. My dad was more stoic, but I could tell he was sad too. They were both worried about me being alone in a new place. But I reassured them that I'd be okay. Olivia took it the hardest. After I told her, she showed up unannounced at my apartment, begging me not to go. She said she felt like she was losing me all over again. It was a difficult conversation, but I stood my ground. I told her this was something I needed to do for myself, and that our relationship wasn't in a place where her opinion could influence my decision. Our relationship is improving, but it's not perfect. We've had a few family dinners over the past few months. They've been awkward and uncomfortable at times, but we're slowly learning to be around each other again. Trust is still a big issue. I sometimes question their motives, wondering if they genuinely mean what they say, or if they're just trying to alleviate their guilt. My therapist has been invaluable throughout this. She's helped me process my emotions and set boundaries. She's emphasized that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or pretending the trauma never happened. It's about releasing my anger so I can find peace. I've taken that to heart. While I don't think I'll ever forget what happened, I'm trying to forgive my family, not for their sake, but for my own. It was exhausting carrying around all that anger and resentment, and I'm ready to let it go. As I prepare for this move, I've been reflecting on everything that's happened. For years ago, I thought my life was over. I'd lost everything, including everyone I cared about. But now, I see how much I've grown from that experience. I'm stronger, more independent, and have a much clearer sense of my own worth than I ever did before. I don't know what the future holds for me and my family. We plan to stay in touch after I move, with weekly phone calls and visits during holidays. It's a start. Maybe, with time and distance, we can build something new. For now, my focus is on the future. I'm excited about my new job, the new city, and the possibilities that await me. I've started looking at apartments online and researching the area where I'll be living. It's a mix of excitement and trepidation. But mostly, I'm looking forward to this next chapter of my life. Whatever happens with my family, I know I'll be okay. I've proven to myself that I can handle whatever life throws at me. And I've learned the importance of surrounding myself with people who believe in me and support me, whether they're related to me or not.